Thank you everyone for joining. Once again, good afternoon. So on behalf of FICCI, I take my pleasure to welcome you all to the FICCI seminar on deciphering the WHO NUGAG guidelines on the use of non-sugar sweeteners. We are happy to share with you that today we have eminent speakers with us from the scientific domain who will share their knowledge and perspective on the guidelines. We have gathered here today to exchange and explore the ideas to foster meaningful discussions. I am delighted to see such an esteemed group of experts, professionals, and enthusiasts in this room. Today on this platform, we have doctors, we have nutritionists, we have scientists from the domain who have come together to explore the opportunity for discussing, deliberating, and exchanging viewpoints. With these words, I would like to invite Ms. Jyoti Ves to give her welcome address. Jyoti ji, please.
Thank you, Anirudh. Dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, all the delegates from the industry, the experts, the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's our pleasure to have this consultative seminar on the WHO NUGAG guidelines, which is on the use of non-sugar sweeteners. So this was, you all know, was issued on the 15th May 2023, and these guidelines are essentially on the use of the non-sugar sweeteners, also known as low no-calorie sweeteners, with a conditional recommendation suggesting that non-sugar sweeteners not be used as means of achieving weight control or reducing the risk of non-communicable diseases. As we understand from the various deliberations that have been going on post the release of the report, that there are various different interpretations that are emerging around the NSS, and there is therefore a need to have a specific substantive discussion on this topic and understand its application in the Indian context. And that's one of the reasons why we have all come together today with all the industry experts and people from the scientific community and some of the media guys to really figure out what this really is all about for India. I think we have so many experts to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about the subject, but broadly as to what we aim to achieve from this one is to get more clarity about the subject, remove the ambiguity which the general population, may be kind of, understanding about this particular guideline which has come around, get the context right. And the lack of understanding which is prevailing currently due to various misinterpretations amongst the different stakeholders, how do we all really bring them to the same page and not really made it into a big issue of misinformed awareness or I think this is called the scattered awareness amongst the consumers. So therefore, it was important for us to have this platform, and I'm really glad to see all of us gathered here in good numbers to help us, create more awareness on the scientific interpretation of the report and its application in the Indian context, as I mentioned earlier also. So it is recognizing the need of the clear messaging of the said guidelines and creating awareness amongst the stakeholders that we are holding this seminar. It'll be very useful, to have all your views put together and share a compendium with the rest of the medium through which we can reach the message, clear message to the larger consumer here. And so now I hand over to Tarun to make further comments and kickstart the deliberations of the seminar that we are doing today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, it's great pleasure to welcome Dr. V. Mohan, Padma Shri Awardee, Chairman, Chief of Diabetology, Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialty Center, Dr. B. Sasikaran, former Director, National Institute of Nutrition, ICMR, Hyderabad, Dr. Rajiv Chawla, Senior Diabetologist and Director, North Delhi Diabetes Center, New Delhi, and past President of RSSDI, Dr. Jagmeet Madan, Principal Professor, Director, Research and Consultancy, Sir Vittal Das Thakase College of Home Science, SNDT University, Mumbai, National President, Indian Diabetic Association, Dr. Mangesh Tiwaskar, Consultant Physician and Diabetologist, Shilpa Medical Research Center, Editor-in-Chief of JAPI, Dr. Pulkit Mathur, Professor and Head, Department of Food and Nutrition and Food Technology, Lady Irwin College, University of Delhi, Mr. C.H. Unikrishnan, News Editor at CNBC TV 18, industry captains, delegates from industries, delegates from media, to the FICCI seminar on deciphering the WHO NUGAG guidelines on the use of non-sugar sweeteners. At the outset, I want to extend my gratitude to FICCI for providing me this opportunity to share my perspective in the capacity of President FICCI Center for Nutrition Excellence. Let me begin today's discussion by mentioning the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat by the present Indian government. The government has been introducing dedicated initiatives towards country's economic development, playing a larger role in the world economy by becoming more efficient, competitive, and capable through this clarion call of self-reliance. Also, our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in its National Health Mission clearly called out and encouraged the need for state-specific innovations. The Indian Council of Medical Research, New Delhi, the apex body in India for formulation, coordination and promotion of biomedical research, is one of the oldest medical research bodies in the world. The ICMR has always attempted to address growing demands of scientific advances in biomedical research on one hand, and towards the need of finding practical solutions to the health problems of the country on the other. While India, due to its rich heritage, had developed capability in the field of medicine with Ayurveda and also in other areas like astronomy, physics and maths, but in case of modern science, especially post-independence, we relied a lot on knowledge from the West. Over the years, there has been a lot of effort and investment in developing Indian research and scientific institutions. As a result of these, we can say with pride that Indian scientific community has come of age with high quality research and clinical work that is being done by Indian doctors and scientists. In this context, from the development to manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines is a perfect example of growing Indian prowess in the areas of scientific capabilities and shining example of Atmanirbharta. With a growing number of doctors and scientists who contribute to the global knowledge through their research, some of whom are present today in this forum, India stands tall in its claim to be the future of development and innovation in the field of science and medicine. Moving on to the health and food industries, as we are all aware that safe, nutritious and healthy food is the one key priority for the government, industries and consumers as well. Food security and nutrition is now a key agenda at the global level, where it has become a fundamental framework and goal for some international organizations like WHO, UN, FAO, UNICEF. In India too, food processing sector and other healthcare bodies have been consistently working towards safe and improved nutrition by encouraging people to eat healthy. There has been effort to provide affordable, nutritious food, fortifying the food products that are available to the consumers today. However, we need to keep on upgrading our policies, processes and infrastructure towards providing health for our people. Today, India is facing a triple burden of malnourishment with undernutrition, obesity and micronutrient deficiency. We are experiencing a rapid health transition with rising burden of non-communicable diseases, surpassing the burden of even the communicable diseases. As per the survey on the National Non-Communicable Disease Monitoring Report, 26% of total adult population in India are overweight or obese. And as per as the latest ICMR India B17 results published in Lancet Diabetes, amongst the survey, substantial portion of Indian are diabetic. For example, 15.3% pre-diabetic, 35.5% hypertensive, 39.5% having abdominal obesity, and 81% having some level of dyslipidemia, which is huge. With this, the projection of diabetes is about more than 101 million people, and that of abdominal obesity is about 351 million. Now, NCDs, the non-communicable diseases, cause considerable loss in potentially productive years of life. Losses due to premature deaths related to heart diseases, stroke, and diabetes are also projected to increase over the coming years. And therefore, intervention pertaining to poor dietary habits and physical activities are critical for us to act on. Coming in onto today's agenda, and like Ms. Jyoti Vij mentioned, the World Health Organization has released a guideline on 15th of May related to non-sugar sweeteners with a conditional recommendation suggesting that non-sugar sweeteners not be used as a means of achieving weight control or reducing the risk of non-communicable diseases. The recommendation has to be assessed on a conditional basis as mentioned by WHO. This signals that policy decisions based on recommendation may require substantive discussions in country-specific contexts, linked, for example, to the extent of consumption in different age groups. Hence, we thank FICCI for providing this unique platform wherein eminent endocrinologists, scientists, nutritionists who have joined us today to share their knowledge, perspective around to say, around the said guidelines and discuss and deliberate on this topic. Building on this context, now I would like to invite our eminent domain experts to enlighten us on this discussion as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarun, for setting the context. Now I would like to invite Dr. Rajiv Chawla. Dr. Rajiv Chawla is a senior diabetologist and director, North Delhi Diabetes Center, New Delhi, and former president of RSSDI. Dr. Rajiv is trained at Diabetes and Endocrinology Center of Western New York and is an approved DNB teacher and guide for 25 years. His academic credentials have been exemplary, and he continues to be widely traveled faculty in both national and international conferences on diabetes. Dr. Rajiv has authored over 10 books. He is a recipient of 18 orations and has over a century papers and publications to his credit, and was awarded by Dr. V. Parmeshwara Lifetime Achievement Award by API in 2015. I request Dr. Rajiv to please deliberate on the topic overview of the non-nutritive sweet. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for those kind words. Dignitaries on dais, off dais, and virtually connected Professor Mohan, Dr. Mangesh. Thanks to FICCI for having me part of this very prestigious symposia today. He has already introduced the topic and the context why we are all here since the release of WHO guidelines on NSS. It happened on 15th or 18th of May. I think there has been a lot of hue and cry. So we all specialists have gathered today, and we'll have a panel discussion after our sessions to see what we can do about it, to put it in the right perspective, to put the right light on the guidelines, how these are relevant to us, whether we need a pharmacovigilance when prescribing NSS, and are these still relevant in our clinical practice to us as diabetologists. We are expert nutritionists across, and towards the end we may have some discussion and conclude where do we stand today. Slides. May I have my first slide? Flow of my session will be first to very simply put, what is diabetes? Because not everyone around is a physician or a medical doctor. What are sugar substitutes and its types? How do we understand what is ADME, that is absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of NSS? And what is ADI, that is acceptable daily intake of NSS, which has been widely recommended by all organizations, maybe NICE guideline, WHO guideline, IDF guidelines, our own guidelines which we released this year in 2022, and 20 we released Diabetes Endocrinology Society of India, RSSD and ESI guidelines, which was a benchmark in terms of our journey in RSSDI, and whether there are really any safety concern. So let's see what is type 2 diabetes. We know diabetes is a heterogeneous disorder. It's a chronic metabolic disorder which happens either as a result of insulopenia, there is a beta cell defect, so you are not able to generate enough insulin to take care of your ingested sugar, or there is a insulin resistance. Resistance means resistance to action of available insulin. So all those patients, those who are new onset, they are not insulinic. Most of them may be obese. They might be having lot of insulin resistance into adipose tissue and muscles to use that amount of glucose. So insulin is on the higher side. There is a hyperinsulinemia, so as to keep sugars within the normal range, what is a target less than 140 milligram. So in layman, we say that insulin is a hormone which works as a key. It opens the lock for entry of glucose into adipose tissue and muscles for utilization of the glucose, so that your sugar comes down and it never exceeds 140 milligram, irrespective of the meal you might have taken. You might have had a very heavy lunch, desserts, 1 or 2, still your sugar will not exceed as long as your beta cells are able to compensate for that. So by the time you have diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, your beta cells are already exhausted. Enough evidence is there that you have lost at least 50 to 80% of beta cell for the first time when you get diagnosed having type 2 diabetes. And moment you have type 2 diabetes, you have persistent hyperglycemia, and that sets in the stage for development of micro as well as macroangiopathy. Microangiopathies are peripheral neuropathy, diabetic nephropathy, end-stage renal disease, or retinal disease. Macroangiopathies are macro as a complication like hypertension, stroke, PVD, gangrene, and cardiovascular death. So this is what I was alluding to. In a normal person, moment there is a intake of glucose or a carbohydrate, even if it is a refined carbohydrate, there are two types of insulin release. One is a pulsatile pattern, which is within 3 to 5 minutes or 8 minutes, which will immediately correct your sugar, get it down less than 140. And another is a basal insulin release, which keeps happening throughout 24 hours, so that your sugar, irrespective whether you have eaten or no, whether you are in the midnight, because it is said that out of 24 hours, 16 hours you are in a fed state. Even if you had 3 meals, that post-absorptive phase lasts for good another 12 to 14 hours. So almost 16 to 20 hours you are in absorptive phase. So to keep sugar there also within the normal range and keep your fasting sugar less than 100 milligram, which is a normal sugar, you have a basal insulin release which keeps sugar within the normal range. And these are alarming figures. 2021 IDF Atlas telling you that there are about 537 million diabetics across the globe, and 3 out of 4, unfortunately, they live in either developing countries, low income or middle income group. And this year, recent publication, Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, you'll hear from Dr. Mohan also, an ICMR initiated study led by Dr. Mohan, almost on 20 centers where 31 states and UTs were collectively studied, and it found that there is a 44% increase in prevalence of type 2 diabetes in this country. From 79 million, it is already 101 million. Much more alarming is the presence of pre-diabetes. Those who still are not in the category to be diagnosed as type 2 diabetes, their fasting sugar is less than 126, post-meal is less than 200 milligram. That is how they qualify to be having pre-diabetes, and that number is 136 million. It is much more than even those who are already diagnosed having type 2 diabetes. So it is something like you are sitting on a time bomb situation. If you follow the natural course of the disease, all those who have pre-diabetes, within 5 years, 30 to 50% are likely to get converted to type 2 diabetes. So it is even the worst situation, and you get almost 6 million deaths across the globe. That means every one death happens within 5 seconds. So this is how the situation is. There are risk factors for development of type 2 diabetes, typically modifiable risk factors where we can do something about that, and non-modifiable risk factors. Non-modifiable are you are born with a line that you are bound to get type 2 diabetes because you have both the parents. So there is a vertical transmission. If you have both the parents, those who are diabetic, there is 70% chance that you will become diabetic in your lifetime. If one parent is diabetic, still you have 40% risk of developing type 2 diabetes. But then there are modifiable risk factors where you can still avoid developing type 2 diabetes by adopting a very, very active lifestyle. You may do 150 minutes of exercise on weekly basis. You have a healthy lifestyle. You follow a good, healthy, balanced diet so as not to catch too much of refined carbohydrate, and you may avoid beta cell dysfunction for quite some time. Then you may avoid smoking, you may not drink. So all these things are, you may avoid stress, and you may have a 6 to 8 hours good sleep, again because that reduces your counter-regulatory hormones, and that is how you may avoid type 2 diabetes. Symptoms are typically polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, increased thirst, and you are all the time running into the washroom. So this is typical when you have a very high sugar. Unfortunately, type 2 diabetes has a very subtle onset. There may not be typical symptoms. It may take 5 years before you get symptomatic. That is how it is said. Type 2 diabetes, by the time they present for the first time with diagnosis, they already have 30 to 50% complication. It could be into the nerves, it could be an abnormal ECG, it could be absent vessels into the legs, it could be peripheral neuropathy or burning in the feet, shoulder pain, frozen shoulders, and UTIs and GTIs. So those may be typical when you don't have typical symptoms in type 2, but type 1 are classical because they manifest with immediate beta cell destruction. So there is a severe hyperglycemia. They may present with diabetic ketoacidosis. On the other hand, you have elderly patient who may have still very high sugars, and they go into dehydration, they are bedridden, they already say in a rehabilitation home with a stroke, and they develop HONC, that is hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. So long-term effects of this is from our own guidelines. Long-term effects of diabetes are you might have a nerve damage, you might have a cardiac problem. The risk of stroke is high by 3 to 4 times. Risk of cardiovascular mortality is high by 3 to 4 times. You are at a greater risk for getting gangrene and amputations. And believe me, any hemodialysis unit you visit in this city or across, 50% of the patients, those who require hemodialysis, they have uncontrolled sugars over the last 15 years. 50% of preventable blindness happens because of poor glycemic control. That is how it is very, very important to control your sugars. Simple means ABC, diet and exercise. An active lifestyle goes a long way. Any amount of drugs, insulin, oral therapy will not help until unless you follow an active lifestyle. A diet discipline is extremely important. Of course, oral drugs, and if required, insulin therapy. I told you by the time you have diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, 50% cells are already lost. Remaining 50% beta cells which produce insulin, which prevent happening diabetes, will be lost over 7 to 9 years or 10 years. So most of the patient in the natural course of the disease will require insulin therapy. That has to be understood not only by all patients, their families, primary physician, so that insulin doesn't come like a slap or a punishment. So they are mentally prepared that if you are not doing well on 2, 3 or 4 drugs, sometime you require insulin therapy. Our ICMR guidelines about type 2 diabetes, if I tell you that we tend to consume about 65% carbohydrate, unfortunately these days we also consume a lot of refined carbohydrates like fast foods and bakery products. Ideally, it should not be more than 55 to 60, and that also should be from complex sources, so that your excursion post meals are not very, very high. You should consume about 15% protein. Unfortunately, Indians don't consume too much. We are vegetarians and we don't have good quality biological proteins because these happen to be much more expensive. But then fat content also needs to go down, anything between 25%, max 30%. But there also, it is not only the type of fat, the quality of fat, the source from it is coming. If it is a saturated fat, it may do more damage. So blending of fats, she will tell us later that how do we mix oils. Blending of fats is very, very important. Maybe one third, mufa, pufa, and saturated fats. And of course, sodium intake. If you are not hypertensive, it's okay, you consume about 5 gram. If you are hypertensive and diabetic, you are already in overload situation, you might have an incipient heart failure. So their sodium intake has to go down close to 2 to 3 gram, but that is must, otherwise you will dip into hyponatremia. Must stop smoking. There is no other way. I tell my patients, especially those who are diabetic, in our surgery book, which we are taught in third year, either have your cigarettes or have your legs if you are a diabetic, because both things will not go till the end of the life, because you might have amputation and you will have to walk without your legs or without your feet. So stop smoking. Moderation of alcohol itself is a huge topic. There is a lobby for alcohol and against alcohol. A moderation is extremely important. Not more than 60 ml for males and not more than 30 ml for females, because now we are finding half or 2/3 of the patient with uncontrolled diabetes, they also have NASH and end up with cirrhosis. So if you are consuming too much of alcohol, you are again likely to be in a bad situation. Let's see what are sugar substitutes. Typical alternative sweeteners are called as sugar substitute, which have no sugar, but they give you sweetness. That is why these are used by normal consumers. Two kinds of sweeteners are there, which have some nutritive value, and non-nutritive sweeteners, which will not provide any calories at all. So these are different types of sweeteners. Amongst the nutritive sweeteners, you have sucrose, fructose, dextrose, corn sugar. High fructose corn syrup is very, very popular. WhatsApp University keeps teaching you a lot of new menus these days. Then honey and maltose. Then sugar alcohols such as sorbitol or mannitol are also available. Amongst the non-nutritive sweeteners, you have aspartame, neotame or steviol glycosides are very, very commonly used. You could use sucralose, which is again good. Saccharin has been used in the past, and you also have potassium also as a source for as a sweetener without any calories value. And this is what has been the journey of all these sweeteners. It started as early as 1879 with discovery of saccharin. Still in the lunch hours I was communicating unofficially, it is still fighting that battle of having a cancer, which was in very small group. So that stigma or black dot is still there on saccharin in spite of almost 150 years of journey. Stevia, then aspartame, sucralose and others, and newer ones are coming. Typical characteristics, I will not go into the detail, but important one, saccharin I told you is often found as a sodium salt of a organic acid. Good thing is it is 300 to 600 times sweeter than sucrose. So you will require very, very small amount to make your food sweet, and acceptable daily intake is 5 milligram per kg per body weight. So these ADIs are very, very important to understand before we start talking of side effects of NSS. You may use stevia, which is again steviol glycoside, 300 times sweeter than sucrose. Almost 4 milligram equivalent you may have per kg per day very, very safely. And these glycosides are passed into the urine. Then you have aspartame, which again consists of methyl esters of 2 amino acids, aspartic acid and phenylalanine. And again it is almost good sweet, almost 220 times sweeter than sucrose. So amount required is very, very less. You could use even potassium salt of organic acid or even sucralose, which is a disaccharide which is made from sucrose itself. So it's a glucose derivative also. So it is again almost 400 to 800 times sweeter, and you might have to use only 5 milligram per kg per daily basis. Typical characteristics of NNS will be that compounds are many times sweeter than sucrose, so you require very small amount. This provides sweetness without adding any calories. You have seen 4 or 5 calories at best with full dose. And these don't ferment to acid by oral bacteria, so will not change the oral plaque at all. No apprehension that something might happen on your dentition and all that. And these are added in very, very small amount because these are too sweet otherwise. So ADME of various non-nutritive sweeteners may not interest you. Most of these are not systematically absorbed. Little bit like saccharin and S-sulfame potassium gets excreted through the fecal route. Little bit goes into the urine. Stevia and aspartame primarily through urine, and same is steviol glycoside. I told you glucuronide derivatives get passed through the urine, and sucralose is hardly absorbed. So these are by and large non-systematic acting drugs, you may say. These are not grossly getting absorbed. Little bit get absorbed, few are passing through the stool, few are passing through the urine in a very metabolized way. So regulatory bodies, let's see what is their stand. NSS safety is evaluated and confirmed by all regulatory bodies before these are launched, whether you talk about FIO, WHO, FDA, or EFSA, that is European Society Safety Authority, and global regulatory bodies. They have approved the use of these artificial sweeteners after reviewing extensive data. It is not that one study will come and nullify what has been there for 100 years, what we have been using saccharin in 1879. And this is based on ADI, which is an acceptable daily intake. This we need to understand. There are two ways. ADME, you will see how much is the total amount that is going to get absorbed, how much is going to be excreted through the feces or through the urine, and how much is the dose which we are going to take, which will be an acceptable dose. So a good formula is that you will do these studies in animals, try to find out the highest, safest dose. Say it is 4000 milligram per kg per day basis. So you will divide it by 100 because of two ways, because we presume that for our safety as human beings, which is absolutely prime, we must take 1/10 of the dose what has been consumed by animal, one. And second, amongst we human beings also, metabolism may differ. Certain are fast accelerators, certain people, they are slow. Metabolites are not equally and immediately formed in certain people or patients for that matter. So we still divide by 10. So if 4000 milligram is a daily dose, we will like to have not more than 40 milligram, and we have a safety factor of 100. So that means even if we consume 40 milligram on daily basis, we are absolutely safe. But fortunately, in our country, we are not primarily using NSS. We tend to use 3, 4, 5 pellets or tablets or sachet, not 6, 7. We tell our patient don't take on an average more than 7, 8. You consume 2, 3 teas, maybe once in milk, in buttermilk, or something else if you have specially prepared a dessert where you need to add, which will not get oxidized. So not more than 6, 7, 8 pellets, while you can safely have up to 40 pellets, while the toxic dose is 4000 milligram, which is 100 times more than what human beings are allowed to use as ADI. So that is what we need to understand. And then we are already determining this. I told you no observed adverse effect level, that is node, which I have already told you. This is how we calculate the dose. So for aspartame, say it is 4000 milligram per kg per day, we are only using 40 milligram, which is ADI, which is the safest dose, and still our patient will not take on an average more than 10 milligram per kg per day. That is how we say that most of these sweeteners are found to be absolutely safe. We are not recommending that everyone whosoever wants to take any amount. We are not, although there are safety data even in pregnancy and young children or adolescent, but we still, as per DCGI guidelines, we don't recommend that these sweeteners are to be taken during the pregnancy or when you are in younger age group or adolescent, although these have been found to be absolutely safe in their trials. So these are the safe level of consumption. What I told you, around 75 pellets of aspartame or saccharin 45 sachets, sucralose you can have 23, and again others 123 and others. So one precaution, those who have phenylketonuria, there we should avoid using aspartame because this has a phenylalanine which has to be metabolized. So I'll stop short here. During the discussion we can have different aspects, how to design the dose, whether we can use it in pre-diabetes or no, whether we can use it in adolescent, and whether we can use these NSS out of type 2 diabetes, that means for healthy adults. Unfortunately, before I sum up in 1 minute, I'll say these WHO guidelines, they have created huge amount of country because of the reason that most of the trials, systematic review from where it has been done are very, very small trials, 3 to 6 months. If you are talking of CV risk addition or reduction, you need 5 years trial. You need prospective studies which should last for 5 years time. You should have an active comparator, not that one NS in one arm and you will say that some damage has been done. You take sugar in another arm and you try to enroll type 2 diabetes patient and you see while consuming NSS is safe or while consuming glucose is safe. So those are different aspects when we discuss science and when we will try to evaluate this trial, and I am sure Dr. Mohan is going to elaborate on that, and safety is going to be discussed by Dr. Mangesh. Thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, for putting very nicely the context of NSS in relation to the NCDs, particularly the diabetes. Now I would request Dr. Mangesh Tiwaskar, consultant physician and diabetologist, Shilpa Medical Research Center, Mumbai, to deliver his address on the safety of non-nutritive sweeteners. Unfortunately, due to some personal exigency, Dr. Mangesh had to change last minute, and he will join online. Dr. Mangesh is a gold medalist and has 104 publications in peer-reviewed national and international journals, and he's also a guest editor of Insulite Journal of the World Journal of Anemia. He's an MRCP examiner at the Royal College of Physicians, United Kingdom. Dr. Mangesh Tiwaskar, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. A quick technical check before I start. Am I visible?
Yes.
And am I audible?
Yes.
So I'll share my screen, and thank you, the dignitaries on dais, off dais, the media partners, the friends from the health industry, and of course, my teacher, Professor Dr. V. Mohan, and my friend, Dr. Rajiv Chawla. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. I must appreciate and salute you to really beautifully sum up the whole thing in a very, very simple way, and to take your baton forward. What I'll try and do and talk a little bit more on this little challenge that this recently released WHO guidelines have probably put in. So, and Dr. Mohan had an opportunity to write down on demystifying some of the myths which have been existing around these non-nutritional sweeteners for a long time. And in last year, JAPI, we published this extensively, and we looked at the published and the available literature in details. And what we looked into this publication is this, that we looked at the various characteristics of the various non-nutritional sweeteners that we have. Then we also had a look on the effect of non-nutritional sweeteners on the body weight and the body mass index. And we also really try to, I would say, explore, its metabolic impacts as far as the diabetes management is concerned. Categorically, we had a special look on the dental health, because we have to understand that along with the other challenges, diabetics, they face dental health problems and the related challenges which will impact not only the health of the patient but overall diabetes control as well. And there are a huge number of myths and misunderstandings about non-nutritional sweeteners and cancer. There is something called as a normal gut microbiota disruption which is likely to be caused by NSS. There were some questions as far as the kidney safety, especially in the patients, those who have a kidney disease. So quickly, in the next 15 minutes of time or so, I'll try and brief all of you about where we exactly stand as far as the non-nutritional sweeteners are concerned. So if you really look at the current perspective of the Indian health status as far as the diabetes, hypertension, so what we call it as non-communicable diseases, and Dr. Rajiv has beautifully alluded that we need to really act fast. And especially when last month only we have surpassed China as far as the population is concerned. We also have to understand that we are very proud to be a younger population currently, but this population is definitely going to grow older a decade and a half later. And once they grow old, probably the onslaught of or the burden of these non-communicable metabolic diseases are going to be very, very huge. So we need to really act smartly. And one such action would be reducing down on the obesity and the overall calorie consumption. Unfortunately, in the Indian scenario, because of the suddenly nutritional affluenza, we have got too many of calories which are available. And even younger kids, everybody sitting at home, and especially during COVID times, we have seen that, the disproportionate putting on the calories have really worsened the entire control. And Dr. Rajiv has already beautifully, I would say, briefed you about the various different non-nutritional sweeteners which are available. And let us have a quick brief overview of what they do as far as the diet pattern is concerned, their impact on diabetes and management of the weight. Now you need to understand that this has been very clear mention in American Dietetic Association publication, which happened way back in 2004, that consumers can safely enjoy a range of nutritive and non-nutritive sweeteners when consumed in the acceptable daily allowances. And in fact, they can form a big part of what we call it as a healthy diet. And always we need to understand, when we say that this is a healthy diet, it is not just diet that we are talking about. We are also talking about, helping to the patients who are trying to give up sugars. So people, those who have sweet tooth, and probably Dr. Rajiv has beautifully said that in India, we are so much carbocentric. We love eating carbohydrates and sugars. Everywhere, whatever is the situation, the sweet box is always there. Somebody visits you, you offer him a sweet box. Somebody is leaving you, you offer him a sweet box. Marriage is happening, you offer him a sweet box. Somebody is born, a sweet box. Somebody is dead, even a sweet box. So 24/7 celebration is on. And that happens only with a very, very high carbohydrate containing challenge. And along with that, when it comes with reduction in the healthy food consumption, reduction in the daily physical activity, it augments the challenge. And that is the place where the role of non-nutritional sweeteners can effectively come in. Not only limiting the energy, but if it is combined with a better improvement in the fresh fruits and the vegetable consumption, or the consumption of the legumes or whole grains or nuts, and increasing the physical activity, probably that can really help people. And there is a good amount of systematic review and the meta-analysis available. And this is one such review that has been published very, very beautifully in 2020, where they looked at the prudency of use of non-nutritional sweeteners in various studies. And these are all the studies which are enlisted. I'm not going to go into the details about it, but what overall it gives you a sense that as far as the body mass index is concerned and its impact on the weight is concerned, all the non-nutritional sweeteners are either weight neutral, or they sometimes help you to sustain the lost weight. And in some meta-analysis, we have also found out that they can cause a reduction in the weight. We always remember that reduction in the weight is a dual-edged challenge. Number one is reducing the weight, and secondly, to sustain that reduced weight. And in both the areas, especially to help patients to sustain that reduced weight, really this could be a very, very effective intervention. And there are so many studies which are on. And always a question is asked whether these non-nutritional sweeteners will impact the diabetes control. And the answer is big no, because they are non-nutritional. They will not yield anything. And as Dr. Raju has beautifully alluded, that majority of the non-nutritional sweeteners will not be absorbed. So they will not have any effect as far as the glucose metabolism is concerned. And there is a good evidence of scientific basis on what I am talking to as far as the glucose control and the glucose metabolism is concerned. And every probably meta-analysis and the systematic analysis has shown that the drugs like aspartame or the drugs like sucralose or asulfam or even stevia, they do not have any impact as far as the glucose metabolic changes are concerned. Now let's talk quickly about what the dietary associations have to suggest as far as the weight is concerned. And you can clearly see on this slide that American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, British Dietitians Association, and even the European Food Safety Society have clearly said that these non-nutritional sweeteners can in fact sometimes facilitate the reduction in the glucose and also can assist in management of the weight. There are some challenges about whether there is an indirect effect of artificial sweeteners as far as the taste related incretin release, but I can tell you that probably this is too hypothetical rather than the practical challenge, because the incretins which are secreted in the response to carbohydrate food and which has got an effect on the pancreatic beta cells to stimulate extra insulin secretion from the pancreas, they do not have anything to do as far as the taste trigger is concerned. So I don't feel so this is to be really bothered about. As far as dental health is concerned, we all are aware that dental health is very crucial, and especially when the patients are diabetic, it becomes still extremely important to understand the importance of the dental health. And mind well that it's not the non-nutritious sweeteners, but in fact it is the consumption of the sugar and the sugary products which has got a higher damaging problems in comparison to the non-nutritional sweeteners. And hence, the EFSA, that is European Food Society Authority, has clearly said that non-nutritional sweeteners can be a good choice, especially for all these people who crave for sweets, because they do not promote any dental caries and they are very, very safe in usually the dental challenges. Couple of minutes on the cancer and the possible myths which exist. Again, the Global Cancer Research Society, like Cancer Research UK or the NHS or NIH, they have clearly said that in a review of multiple and huge published data, clearly suggests that there is no risk of cancer associated with the use of non-nutritional sweeteners. And in fact, the experiments on the animals, the chimpanzees and the monkeys have been so much that you can go on the web anytime and you can yourself find out that these non-nutritional sweeteners are not related to cancer, or they are not even cancerogenic. There is no association between the higher cancer risk and the NSS in the human beings. Lastly, I'll talk about the gut microbiota. Now, we all know that gut microbiota is one of the determining factor. I know for the non-medical people, those who are there currently attending this webinar, it might be a little difficult for them to understand. But we need to understand that gut microbiota decides our not only the regular health or the general health, but also our metabolic health. And gut microbiota in common man's term is the the lining of our entire large intestine and to some part of small intestine with the normal protective bacterial flora, which are actually the protective things for multiple onslaughts that your human body can have. And there were some questions asked whether these non-nutritional sweeteners can really impact this gut microbiota and reduce down our defenses. And what is the best way of assessing their damage is that usually these microbes, they produce something called as a short chain fatty acids when they are under the stress. So whether the microbiota is under the stress or not is usually assessed by the assessment of the amount of the short chain fatty acids concentration in the stools. And in the metabolic analysis, it has been found that whether it is a pre-sucralose use or a post-sucralose use, or a pre-aspartame use or a post-aspartame use, as you can see on your slides, there was no change in the short chain fatty acids, especially the short chain fatty acid analysis is concerned. So that indirectly tells us that gut microbiota is not touched, and on the contrary, is high sugary diet or direct presence of sucrose or fructose in the food can genuinely and definitely impact the normal healthy gut microbiota. Always remember that these non-nutritive sweeteners, they do not have any impact on appetite and hunger. In fact, sometimes, especially when the patients, they do have what that, I would say craving for sweet, especially after finishing the lunch or the dinner, that can easily, that thirst or that craving can be easily quenched by giving them probably something which is prepared from the non-nutritional sweetener, which will not only reduce down the sugar consumption, but also will see to it that the overall caloric load is not so bad. Talking quickly about the chronic kidney disease, it has been clearly proved, and Dr. Rajiv has also short way alluded to it, that non-nutritional sweeteners, they do not have any problems as far as the chronic kidney disease patients are concerned. And here I'm talking about not only chronic kidney disease patients, but also the kidney transplant or organ transplant recipients, or the patients on dialysis or the renal replacement therapy. It has been shown that all these non-nutritional sweeteners, they do not have impact in the acceptable daily allowances. And to prove what I am saying, almost more than 100 countries in the world, almost all these artificial sweeteners which are there on the screen are still approved, and nothing is banned yet. And as far as the Indian scenario is concerned, as far as FICCI is concerned, as far as the DCGI is concerned, as far as the ICMR is concerned, we need to understand that all these artificial sweeteners are allowed in the acceptable daily range. And this is what Dr. Rajiv has shown, that if at all we have to really cross those toxic levels and cross those higher challenge levels, usually you need to consume more than 155 pellets of a saccharin tablet every day, which nobody consumes, because one tablet of a saccharin or an aspartame or a sucralose or a stevia is like equal to one sugar of the spoon. So are we going to have 155 spoons of the sugar every day for any time ever? Nobody would consume that, isn't it? So I think probably, as far as Indian perspective is concerned, we need to have our own views and ideas. And I believe I'm really, really happy to say that it is good that the FICCI and the entire team has brought up this point. I hope I have probably alluded to my usual topic, and for the further deliberation, I would hand it back to the entire FICCI team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mangesh, for giving a nice perspective to the NSS role in weight management and in dental care. You also mentioned that there is no association of NSS in cancer and other chronic diseases. So thank you very much for that. Now I would like to invite Dr. V. Mohan. Dr. Mohan doesn't need any introduction, in fact. Dr. Mohan is a Padma Shri awardee. He's a chairman and chief diabetologist at Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialty Centers in Chennai. Dr. Mohan oversees a chain of 50 diabetes centers across 8 states. He's also a chairman of Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, which is an ICMR Center for Advanced Research in Diabetes. Dr. Mohan, you all know, that has published the maximum number of papers to his credit. He has published over 1580 papers in peer-reviewed journals, which includes more than 1,000 original articles. His research has attracted 181,000 citations and has an H index of 148. He has received over 200 awards, including the Dr. Harold Refkins Award by the American Diabetes Association. He was also conferred upon the FRS from the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Dr. Mohan was awarded with Padma Shri in 2012. This is the 4th highest civilian award presented by the Government of India. You all know that about his biography, which is a big hit on the Amazon, is the Making Excellence a Habit, the secret of building a world-class healthcare systems. His latest book is Banting Bows and Beyond. The floor is yours, Dr. Mohan, please.
Thank you so much. I'll try to share I think if that can go off, I'll now share my screen. I hope the slides are visible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have had wonderful presentations by Dr. Rajiv Chawla, who took us through the what are the safe limits and what is generally accepted to be safe. And he clearly mentioned that actually it's not even possible for human beings to consume the amount of, unless some paranoid person keeps on, or obsessive compulsive person keeps on eating some sweetener or something like that. I don't think a normal person can even consume the amount of sweeteners which are mentioned as a safe limit. And this is again beautifully taken forward by Dr. Mangesh Srivaskar, who actually referred to that article which we published last year. We had no inkling at all that WHO will be coming out with this report, and I don't know what made us write that. There were a few reports saying that, are the sweeteners safe, and can it affect gut microbiota? And actually there are some studies going on. I'll briefly allude to them. But at that time we thought it was appropriate that why don't we just clear this myth? Because among public, there's always been a fear that these non-nutritive sweeteners or sweeteners for the artificial sweeteners or alternatives, as you call them, are bad. And this actually stems from the original Saccharin report, where they used some 2,000 times a human dose on these poor mice which have such small bladders. The size of the bladder is about that big in a mice. And you load it with 2,000 times a human dose, the poor mice will get cancer, whatever you give. Even if you inject water at that dose, it will get cancer, So it produced cancer. And immediately they said, oh, saccharin will produce cancer. And saccharin was withdrawn in the US. Not one human patient or one human being has ever been diagnosed with cancer due to saccharin in the last 50 years or in the last 100 years. Not even one human being, not even one case report. But when US, banned it based on that mice report, everybody, then they said, oh, saccharin will produce cancer. After that, every sweetener which came for the last, I've been in this field for 50 years, and every sweetener came, oh, that will produce cancer, that will produce cancer, that will produce cancer, that will produce cancer. And we say, show us one report, show us one case in the world where cancer is, and nobody is able to produce even one case. There's not even one reported case. How this cancer myth comes, God only knows. So anyway, when the WHO issued this statement, I thought it was a very strong statement for WHO to issue. But maybe in some countries, the consumption of nutritive sweeteners is very high. And maybe it is valid in some countries. I would like to concur with both the speakers, both my friends, Dr. Rajiv Chawla and Mangesh Srivastava, that nowhere in India, to my knowledge, people consume that high level of non-nutritive sweeteners. Also, let me just add one more thing, that the WHO clearly said that this does not apply to people with diabetes. And to my knowledge, 95% of people who use kind of non-nutritive sweeteners in our country are people with diabetes. So it does not even apply. What WHO said does not even apply, because clearly they say this is not meant for people with diabetes. They are the very people who would like to cut down on the sugar. And to my knowledge, people in India taking a non-nutritive sweetener to reduce weight, I would say it's even a waste of time. You reduce your sugar, your rice intake or your wheat intake or carb intake, your weight will go down. Not by stopping those 3 spoons of sugar and then replacing it with 3 tablets of nutritive sweetener. You're not going to lose weight, because 1 spoon of sugar is like 5 grams. So 15 grams, if you cut down 60 calories, you're not going to lose weight at all. So I don't think for that purpose in India, it's even used. Having said that, this paper was referred to by both the earlier speakers, the ICMR INDAB study, just off the press, actually published only on June 7th, where these numbers were already alluded to by Dr. Rajiv Chawla, that the number of people in India with diabetes is 101 million people. And these 101 million people, we are going to tell them, don't take sugar. So they ask us, can we take 1 tablet of a nutritive sweetener in 2 cups of coffee, so 2 tablets per day? No, don't take. WHO said you can't take even those two tablets, So it's actually cruel to me to tell our diabetic, and of course, WHO has even said it doesn't even apply to a diabetic patient. Now we have got a huge load of other NCDs like pre-diabetes, dysglycemia, hypertension. Now, a lot of this is related to obesity, and this number of obesity was already mentioned by earlier speakers, 350 million people. And we all know that sugar intake and carb intake is actually related to this increase. And these are non-nutritive sweeteners, mean they don't have calories at all, 0 calories. So at least theoretically, if you were to make a unemotional kind of a decision, you would say, well, any reduction in calories is good for you. Okay. Now, what is the data that we have on sugar? We know that free sugars are associated with poor dietary quality and increase in obesity, NCD, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. I don't think anyone in this audience or in any audience will contest that. And WHO also says, don't take sugar. They say that WHO says that children and adults should take less than 10% of the daily calories from free sugar, and a further reduction to below 5% would provide additional health benefits. The WHO is actually saying don't take sugar. Now, if you also say that don't take sweetener also, then what are you going to take instead? That is a question which I'd like to pose. Now, the American Heart Association also says limit the sugar intake. So at the question of reducing sugar, I don't think there's any debate at all. Okay. Now, in India, if you look at the sugar consumption, Dr. Mangesh Devaskar mentioned that for every function we give sweets and sugar-based things. Now, the actual sugar consumption by India is 25 kilograms of sugar per year. So it's not a small amount. That the actual sugar consumed is very high in India. And you can see in all the states of India, it is very high. Now, sugar added as in coffee and tea as table sugar is not the only source of sugar in the Indian diet, by the way. You also get it in honey, brown sugar, jaggery, and so on. Also from cakes and biscuits, chocolates, candies, processed foods, traditional sweets, which contain tons of sugar. And also you can get from high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar. Now in the West, this is a huge source of sugar. In India, maybe not that much because we eat so much of carbohydrate in the form of rice and wheat. If you calculate the total glycemic load coming from that, and we've done this in Chennai, the actual sugar intake is less than the actual carb intake. So if somebody wants to lose weight, I'll say cut down your carbs, cut down the amount of rice you take. That will help you to reduce the weight. Now, high sugar consumption, I'm not going to go into this because the insulin resistance has already been mentioned by Dr. Chawla, and weight gain, obesity, the changes on gut microbiota, which is mentioned. If you take sugar intake, there are tons of studies which show that your gut microbiota are affected. The question is whether the nutritive sweeteners will affect that. And Dr. Mangesh has already showed you our analysis of all the data published in the world saying that there's not much evidence. And I'll show you some data which we are also collecting. So in this background of sugar being really bad, a non-nutritive sweetener or a low-calorie sweetener is actually a safer option for reducing the sugar and caloric intake without sacrificing the sweet taste. Now, there are a lot of people, including me, who have a sweet tooth. And so if we just cut out that sweetness from whatever from our life, people go into depression. They say, I cannot even have that little sweet. And so they say a little bit of sweetener, now I feel better. You know, Indians particularly have a sweet tooth. That is where I think the role of this non-nutritive sweetness comes in. Now, this report has, as has been mentioned, generated a lot of heat and a lot of debate. More than light, I think it has generated a lot of heat. Now, I am not even contesting that if you take too much of non-nutritive sweeteners, you keep on drinking tons and tons of this zero-calorie sweet drinks, which are loaded with sweeteners, that is good for you. I don't know how much if you keep on taking that, whether it will think. The other thing is that there is a false consumption that if direct sugar is not there, then you will never put on weight if you take anything else. Now, if you take Indian sweets, they have a lot of calories, they have a lot of ghee, they have a lot of other things. Sugar alone is removed and you replace it with a non-nutritive sweetener. Now, if you say, I'm not taking sugar, therefore I will lose weight if I take this, you're not going to lose weight because the calories are there. So is the sweet bad or is the sweetener bad? I think it's the dessert with all the calories which is bad, not the little sweetener which you put into it. We think that it's a sweetener which is increasing your weight. It's not a sweetener increasing your weight. It is the dessert with all the calories which is increasing your weight. That distinction, I think, must be made very clearly. Now, this is the background of the systematic review which was done. A lot of studies were reviewed, and I would like to present to you the actual data presented in the WHO report. I'm not making it up. I'll just tell you what exactly was presented. Now, all the data is based on meta-analysis performed on RCTs, randomized clinical trials, cohort studies, and case control studies. And each study, as you know now, you can use the grade recommendation to see the quality of the study. Is it a high quality study, medium quality study, or a bad quality study? Now, if you look at all the randomized clinical trials, the RCTs, okay? Now, here are in a quick summary of this, and I'll go into it in greater detail. Actually, they have shown, all the RCTs have shown that there's a decrease in body weight, decrease in BMI, there is an increase in the ratio of total cholesterol HDL, but otherwise decrease in energy data, decrease in sugar intake. We don't have much data on pregnancy, and cancer, there is no data. So this is what the RCTs have shown. And in type 2 diabetes, improvement in the various markers like glucose and all that have been seen. Now, some of the case control studies, which have lower quality evidence, and I'll come back to that, have shown that if you take too much of these non-nutritive sweeteners, you can have increase in obesity, slight increase in BMI and so on. But look at the quality of the evidence there. This is from the WHO report I'm saying. I'm not saying from the same report I'm telling you. quality evidence low, very low, 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 very low, 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 low. They have never said even one study that the quality of evidence is high. Okay, so we are showing you here is the quality. They themselves are saying the quality of evidence is very low, very low, very low, very low to low. Not even one is medium quality. That is the one based on which they made all these reports. I was actually slightly surprised when I read this. When they have said that on one side RCTs are showing benefit, case control studies with very low evidence are showing this. How can they overall conclude that non-nutritive sweeteners are bad? They even go to the extent of saying it's bad for diabetes and obesity and heart disease and produce stroke and produce this and produce that and so on. The 1 or 2 studies which have recently been published have been on erythritol. And erythritol is not used in our country at all. And even that was done in very small numbers, and the quality of those studies are also questionable if you actually look at it. Okay, so the overall summary is RCTs have found benefit. The prospective, the case control studies may have some bad effects, but again, the quality of evidence is very low. This is just to tell you that if you list, and this is not just for sweeteners, for anything, any study, RCT is right on top, and meta-analysis and reviews. Meta-analysis was right on top along with the RCTs. Then you go down, 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 down. Case reports, cross-sectional studies and so on are very low in the evidence. And it is based on this that some of those conclusions were drawn. Now, if you look at the RCTs, okay, let's look at, these are all the RCTs which were published in the WHO report. I'm not showing you from any other report. I'm taking the WHO report itself. Now, if it is on this side of the line, it means it is actually useful, okay? And if it's on the other side of the line, it does not favor the non-nutritive sweetness. If it's on this side, it favors the non-nutritive sweetness. Look at where all the graphs are. All the graphs are on the other side, okay? If you look at all the graphs on this side, everything is one study which is on this side. Every other study is favoring the non-nutritive sweetness, okay? And this as far as the body weight is concerned, because the concern was obesity, that weight will increase. These are RCTs, proper randomized clinical trials, all of which are showing benefit, not only not showing increase in weight, they're actually showing reduction in the weight, okay? Now, if you look at the effect on, again, data from the RCTs, now divided according to the individual compounds, as sulfamate, saccharin, stevia, and so on. What are the studies in favor? 22 studies are in favor. What are not in favor? 4. And what are neutral is 7. So neutral you should take as no evidence, isn't it? So if you add this and this, there's 29 studies which are either in favor or neutral, and there are 4 studies, okay, which have shown, and that is not that doesn't include sucralose. Does not. 2 of them are unspecified. We don't even know which sweetener they took. Okay, there's 1 on sucralose and 1 on aspartame in the whole world. That's it. There are 2 studies, and both these studies are relatively small studies based on 20-30 people. Now here is a meta-regression, again looking at body weight, and you can see, if anything, there is a reduction in the body weight shown if you take all the studies together. Now, I cannot reveal the results of the study because in 3 days' time, we are going to present 3 papers at the American Diabetic Association. I can tell you what the papers are, but I cannot tell you the results because they are embargoed until they are presented at the American Diabetic. But all have been peer-reviewed, and all are going to be presented at the American Diabetic Association exactly 3 days from now. So one of them is on cardiometabolic risk factors among overweight people. So we've taken a separate study. All of them are on sucralose, by the way. And we've looked at sucralose and its effect in non-diabetic obese people. Then we have got a study in diabetic people where we looked at HbA1c, weight, and other metabolic parameters, including lipids and so on. And finally, we have one on gut microbiota itself. Large number. This will be probably the largest study on gut microbiota. The gut microbiota data is outsourced. We don't do it in-house. We've collected the sample and sent it to another agency which is doing it. They don't know which sample they're analyzing. They're totally doing it blind. We just get the results and then we take it and we do. And these are the results. All I can tell you is that we don't find any deleterious effects. If at all, we find beneficial results. And the reason for that could be that we have replaced sugar with the non-nutritive sweetener. So when you're comparing, as was mentioned by earlier speakers, you cannot just compare non-nutritive sweetener with nothing. You'll have to compare it with the alternative, which is sugar. So if you compare it with sugar, definitely the non-nutritious sweetener is better than sugar. There's no doubt about it. More of it in the next 3 days. You can read about it when it's presented in the American Diabetes Association. And you can see the sample size is not small. 420 people have been studied, and to do gut microbiota in large numbers is not an easy thing to do, but we have done it. It's been going on for the last 1.5 years, and we didn't start the study after the WHO. We started last 1.5 to 2 years. The study has been going on. Now the study is just getting published. Now coming to the case control studies. Now, if you look at the case control studies, yes, there is some evidence that there is an increase in the weight gain. Now remember, when you do a case control study or you do an epidemiological study, there are hundreds of confounders. Now, it is not if you follow somebody for 1 year, 2 years, is it only sweetener that they are taking? It's not a randomized clinical trial. There's no control group, nothing. You're just following them up. Those who took sweeteners, did their weight go up? Now, how do you know that the sweetener people who are taking that, they did exercise or not? How do you know that? How do you know what they ate? They're free living people, okay? We don't know the total calories. We don't know the carbohydrate intake. We don't know anything. So if weight gain occurs, how do you know it's due to the sweetener? Okay, that group might have gained weight. I'm not saying no. But how do you know it's due to the sweetener? You know, the little bit of sweetener they took, that only produced the weight gain. For that, you need mechanistic studies, which have not been done. You will not get that from an epidemiological study with all its confounders. So yes, there is weight gain. And if it is so, why was the grade of all the studies marked as low, low, very low, very low? Because there is no evidence. Because they're not able to conclude that it is due to that. If they really concluded, then it would have been nice. But they're not able to conclude. No, there is something called as reverse causation. Okay, reverse causality we call it. If you understand epidemiology, you'll know that. Somebody puts on weight. Okay, and somebody, it's like saying the divorce rates are very high in Kerala, and tapioca consumption is also very high in Kerala. So tapioca produces divorce rates. You can't conclude like that, isn't it? Just because Kerala takes a lot of tapioca and there is a lot of high divorce rate, you cannot say one is due to the other, isn't it? It can be just a coincidence. If you take tapioca and only those people develop divorce, then you can say, yeah, something makes you divorce if you take tapioca, because you're not getting your rice and you're not happy or something. So these are false things which can come in the scientific literature unless you are very, very careful about it. Okay. Now, again, to repeat what Dr. Mangesh Devaskar also said, which are the highest associations in the world? Leave WHO. WHO is a very, and we are a WHO collaborating center. So I'm part of WHO. I'm all the committees, all diabetes committees, WHO. I'm there. So I'm a strong supporter of WHO. But let's read what other associations have said. American Diabetic Association. Okay, they are the people who should be worried about sugar and all that. What are they saying? The use of non-nutritious sweeteners has the potential to reduce calorie and carbohydrate intake if substituted caloric sweeteners without compensation by intake of additional calories. Substituting non-sugar sweetened beverages might help to reduce the increase in blood sugar levels. So they're saying if you cut off sugar, your blood sugar level will go down. That's what we found. Actually, we're going to show it now. Okay, American Heart Association is also saying the same thing, that when used judiciously is very important. You cannot take tons of it. You know, there is a safe limit, and the safe limit has been fixed by industry itself, has fixed a safe limit. If you go above that, then you're asking for trouble, isn't it? But I would like to submit that in India, we are far, 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 far below that level, and that question does not even arise going to the limit which has been set. So here, what they're also saying is that it's a useful strategy to reduce the sugar intake of sugar-sweetened beverages. Now, if you look at the EFSA statement, which again Dr. Mangesh showed, so I'm not going to go into detail, each one they're saying aspartame is not of safety concern, sucralose is okay, and so each one they're saying is actually okay, and they are actually saying you can take it. Now, if you look at the statement given by the WHO non-sugar sweeteners guideline, immediately after that, the British Nutrition Foundation is an independent association of all the nutritionists who are in Britain. So they have said that this recommendation is only conditional as opposed to strong. It's not a strong recommendation. It's a conditional recommendation because of the uncertainty over the risk versus benefits. And it's based on evidence that WHO classified as low certainty. So it's not me who's saying it. It's the British Nutrition Foundation which is saying it. Immediately after that, they came back, and lot of nutritionists came back and said, hey, this appears to be too strong. And the evidence is so low. And to make a statement like that, and so considering the conditional nature recommendation, the fact that sweeteners have been vigorously tested for safety, it seems sensible to continue to make use of all the tools to improve people's diet. So we should ask people, you take more vegetables, take more fruit, cut down on carbohydrate, cut down on sugar wherever possible. If you use non-nutritive sweeteners, use them sparingly. Don't use too much of it. Some doubt has been raised, so don't use it, and so on. And so the results of this review say that short-term RCTs had lower body weight and BMI. So the RCTs are showing lower body weight. Those consuming NSS also exhibit significant reduction in energy intake, and results from prospective cohort studies suggests the possibility of long-term harm, but further research is needed to prove this. So at present, we cannot conclude that there is any harm after using these. So again, to emphasize to this audience, the WHO advises it not to use non-sugar sweeteners for weight control. That's all they've said. They've clearly said it doesn't apply to people with diabetes. So what do we as diabetologists do? If our people come and ask us, well, you continue it, don't take too much. And for weight reduction, nobody is going to, very few people in India I know are actually using it for weight reduction. So I would say this WHO report does not even apply to India at all, where we mostly use it for diabetic people. And as of now, the people who use it for weight reduction as such are very few. So what is the way out? Sugar intake definitely has to be reduced, no doubt about it. The use of the low-calorie sweeteners within acceptable daily intake may help reduce the sugar intake. Moderation is the key, no doubt about it. Little sugar swaps can be, so instead of little sugar, change with add a little sweetener and so on. And you should not increase the calories. Oh, I've cut this down, so I'll take more calories somewhere. Then it is foolish. You're not going to lose weight at all. And we need to assess how much of we don't even have this data. How much of NNS is being used in India? We don't have a data. I know we have Dr. Shashikaran, we have Dr. Jagdish Madan, and a lot of top nutritionists in this audience. I think we should collect the data. How much is actually being consumed? How much below the accepted level are we taking? And then long-term data is also needed. What we have now is a few months data, a few months follow-up, maybe 6 months, but we should continue to take the people who have taken it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I think we should continue to use that. So with that, I will stop, and thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan, for that wonderful presentation. You make it so easy and so simple to understand for anyone. Now we move to another session, which is the fireside chat on the application of WHO guidelines on the use of non-sugar sweeteners in Indian context. I will request Mr. Unni Krishnan to come on the dais, please. I also request Dr. Jagmeet Madan and Dr. Pulkit Mathur, please, on the dais. Mr. Unni Krishnan is a senior consulting editor at CNBC TV 18. He has the view section of the digital unit of this top business channel in India. He is the founding member of the India's first pharmaceutical portal, pharmabiz.com. He has almost 3 decades long journalistic career. He has handled leadership roles in several top media organizations, which include Business World, Mint, the Wall Street Journal, the Business Standard, amongst others. He has also credited to have founded the edited India's premium medical science magazine, Future Medicine. The floor is yours, Mr. Unni Krishnan. You may introduce the panelists as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anirudh, for the kind introduction. Respected panelists friends, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank FICCI for organizing such a wonderful session, capturing a very timely topic. And here, all our eminent speakers have already explained what the current situation, what is the scenario as far as India's diabetic challenges are concerned, and also they touched upon the veracity of the WHO guideline which came now. So here I'll just summarize. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a scientist, but I can understand well in the layman's language what exactly the issue is concerned with our health. Here I'll briefly summarize what WHO said. Now we have heard the speakers here. They spoke about the scientific side of what is diabetes. Yeah. And so we will limit this particular session to the WHO guideline and and to try to make more clarity on this, because now as such the guideline doesn't give a very clear evidence or a direction or a decision that what needs to be done. So it has left the countries or the stakeholders to discuss this and to conclude on what needs to be done. So WHO guideline basically says the non-sugar sweeteners, which was once very strongly recommended as a best alternative for sugar, especially for diabetic patients and even the general population. Now all of a sudden WHO has come out with a statement saying that it doesn't actually help weight control to manage weight. And also they are saying that it actually, the long-term use of non-sugar sweeteners hasn't clearly given the evidence that it actually controls or it is beneficial for controlling blood sugar. And they're making another statement. Rather, the long-term use of non-sugar sweeteners may lead to the other health risks like cardiovascular or diabetes, obesity, and even mortality. So that is one side. That is the side of WHO, and they have analyzed. They have given the evidence of various studies. So India, the largest diabetic country, is not been tried for this particular this WHO analysis. So all put together, it is still in a very confused state. So that is why the relevance of this particular session. And we are not moving into what the regulators should do now, what the government, what should be the decision of the government, whether to allow the industry, whether not to allow the industry, or to come out with a proper, better guideline and all that. So we need to have data. We need to discuss very at length on the scientific side, the generation of data, the medical side, as well as then come to the regulatory challenges, what needs to be done. The government should take some action, what action should be taken by the industry and all that. So now this session is mainly restricted to the scientific side of it. Of course, the previous speakers have very thoroughly explained this topic in front of us. So in this session, fortunately, we have got the best names in the area of nutrition management, diabetes management in the country. So let me, this is my privilege to introduce my panelists today. We have Dr. P. Mohan. We all have heard him. He is the chairman and chief diabetologist Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialist Center. And he also runs a very extensive research wing as part of his group as a Madras Diabetes Foundation, right? Yeah. We have Dr. B. Shashikaran, former Director, National Institute of Nutrition, ICMR Hyderabad, and Dr. B. Mohan and Dr. Shashikaran will be joining online in this session. We also have Dr. Rajiv Chawla, Senior Diabetologist and Director, North Delhi Diabetes Center, and past President of RSSDI. We have Dr. Mangesh Tiwaskar. He will also be joining online. He's consultant physician and diabetologist at the Shilpa Medical Research Center, Mumbai, and he's also editor-in-chief of JAPI. And we have eminent nutritionist, Dr. Jagmeet Mada. She is principal and professor and director at Sir Vitaldas Thakarse College of Home Science, which is part of SNDT. Then she is also national president of Indian Diabetic Association. And we have Dr. Pulkit Mathu. She is professor and head of Department of Food and Nutrition and Food Technology, Lady Irwin College, University of Delhi. Welcome, panelists. Now, to set the context of this discussion, we need to discuss about the diabetic scenario in the country. Now, we all know that we are the largest, we have the largest patient pool of diabetes in India, in the world. So, Dr. Mohan, as all of you know, that he has recently done a very extensive study on diabetic population of India, where so far till recently our data about diabetic population of India was around 65 to 70 million, and all of a sudden we are getting the data that we have more than 101 million diabetic patients in India. It's shocking, really. And another pool, which is currently called pre-diabetic, is joining this group. So we are actually sitting on a time bomb, and there will be an explosion of this particular disease, which is a slow killer. So that's why very, very critical. And this discussion is also going to be very important and rather more sensitive, because we have so many products in the market now, which is recognized as the best alternative to sugar. And now we are getting some kind of a contradictory views. So let me ask Dr. Mohan, see, we have recently seen your extensive study, which is published in Lancet, and that actually reveals the increasing prevalence of diabetes in India. What are the causes and implications of rising epidemic of this metabolic non-communicable disease in India? So could you please throw some light or enlighten us with your data and what you have seen?
Thank you, Mr. Anikrishnan, for raising this very valid issue. And there is no doubt that there has been a steep increase in the numbers of people with diabetes in India. Although I have pointed out in other forums as well that people are asking, how did it increase in 3 years from 72 million to 101 million? And I must clarify that, take 30 seconds to clarify that. The 72 million number was based on the first 15 states of India which were studied. Out of those 15 states, 7 were from the Northeast, which had very low prevalence of diabetes. When we studied the next 15 states, most of the southern states, Kerala was included, Goa was included, Puducherry was included, a lot of states with very high prevalence rates were included. So it's not fair to say that in 3 years it jumped from 72 million to 101 million. The data at that time, based on 15 states, extrapolated the whole country, had shown that. But when you actually finished the whole study and included states like Kerala and all, which had very high prevalence rates of diabetes, now the actual number is 101 million. It could have actually increased by some. Part of it could have been increased by COVID. But I think in general, this increase has been going on over a period of time. About 20 years ago, we had only 30 million people with diabetes in India. Then became 40, 50, 60, 70. Now from 70, after 4 years, we're saying it's now 100 million. Now the study has been complete. The whole country has been completed now. So this is the most authentic figures based on the demography up to the end of 2021. And 2022, we analyzed it, and 2023, it got published. So that is the data. Now, what are the actual causes of the increase in diabetes? Very tempting to say that we as Indians are more prone genetically. That's not true, because in 1970s, in the cities, only 2% had diabetes. Today, it's 26%. In 40 years, all our genes didn't change. I'm sure Dr. Shashikaran and I were certainly around at that time, and all our genes didn't change in 50 years. What changed is the way we live. Those who were going walking are now going by scooter. Those who are going by scooter are going by car. And we have started since 1991, after the economy took off. A lot of disposable income has started coming. India has become an affluent country, so we are eating rich food. We are eating out more frequently. All the high carb, high fat, high sugar, high salt diet is going in. Apart from that, physical activity has gone down drastically. Our youngsters are now working to US timing, earning in US dollars, but the price they pay is the sleep is gone. So everything which is diabetogenic, we are exposed to. Now, in a way, in fact, one of the reviewers asked me, so what is your solution? Make India poor again, then all your diabetes will go down. I said, no, that's a typical British reviewer. So I said, no, we won't, make India poor again. We will teach our Indians that along with affluence, you also have to walk and you have to do something. Otherwise, you're going to pay the price of diabetes and so on. Okay. And so that is the main reason. I think it's the environmental factors which change. And sugar certainly plays a role. Carbohydrate plays a role. But in India, the carbohydrate, while sugar contributes a lot, the carbohydrate much more comes from rice and wheat. And because 3 times a day we are eating carbs. On top of that, when you add sugar also, it's like the last straw on the camel's back. That is where probably there is a role, at least among people with diabetes, to cut off sugar. And if it's in small quantities, replace it with sweeteners. I am certainly not one who advocates cutting down on and taking non-nutritive sweeteners for weight loss. I don't think that's ever been proven, and I don't think that's the way to go also. There are much better ways to lose weight. Get up and run every day, then you will lose weight, not cut off sugar and add one sweetener in it. That's a very easy way, and I wish by that we could all lose weight. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's why the numbers of India has increased. It's due to our affluence and all the diabetogenic things which have happened. I'm not even talking about things like pollution, pesticides, COVID. All these things are also contributing, but the evidence is not as strong as we have for obesity, physical inactivity, and extra carbs and extra calories being the main drivers. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, I think, he very simply, in simple language, he put it, and it gives much more clarity on what is the basic reason, and and that really gives us the solution as well, what needs to be done. And now, Dr. Mohan, I have another question which is very narrowly focused on the WHO guideline. I'll come back to you with that.
Okay.
Later.
Yeah.
Now, let me move on to Dr. Shashikaran. See, sugar reduction in public health policies. That was accepted, that was recommended, accepted, and now we are following. But how can this be achieved? Really, what the target?
Yeah. Thank you, Munikrishnan. And in fact, we just heard what Mohan has said. I'll continue where he left off. The problem in India is several people who develop diabetes are actually not obese. Actually, they are much thinner people and leaner people are developing diabetes. That is one thing we should remember. And therefore, the link of losing weight and diabetes does not exist as far as our country is concerned. And the next thing is the WHO's earlier recommendation that we keep the sugar to less than 10% of the total calories, roughly comes to 50 grams, is something our country and the food regulator has been working on through front of pack regulation, educating people, etc. In this situation, this WHO recommendation actually has come as a way of creating a little bit of a confusion in the minds of the policymakers in our country. Safety is not an issue because the joint WHO FAO itself thoroughly looks at the safety issues. And even here, if you see the several of the safety related studies which they are quoting show very low hazard risk or very low relative risk, which is almost close to 1. So if normal is 1, this is around 1.1, 1.2, which is not considered as anything of a major risk. So we are really not worried about what the risk part is. Okay. Now, and even the issue like cancer, which is also one of the things which always is a very scary word, this happened only with saccharin, which happened 50 years ago, and it happened in the rat and no other species. Okay. Imagine the bladder cancer could not be reproduced subsequently even in other animals like rabbits or monkeys. It happened only in the rat, and therefore that is literally a non-issue. Still, people keep talking. There are much newer nutritive, non-nutritive sweeteners which have come inside on which there is no data. And they are all clumped all the sweeteners into one and generated the data. The RCTs and the prospective cohort studies definitely show that there's a small benefit in weight loss, but weight loss is something which I think we should not worry much about. The question is, what do we do as policy is, we then have to look at the risk-benefit ratio. The risk of consuming sugar and all its consequences thereof are many, many times higher than the marginal risk, that too with not sufficient evidence being mentioned in the WHO. So this is rather a update on the data which is available, which they are WHO is providing to the country, rather than anything that requires immediate action. Of course, we need to continue research and for our own to generate our own data, and we have to quantify the risk based on which the country through regulation can find ways of risk management. So ultimately the question is a question of risk-benefit ratio. The risk of consuming sugar is much more than the minuscule risk of a sweetener causing any kind of a harm. We could also think in terms of labeling, and so that the people don't get misled that you take something containing a sweetener, you are likely to lose weight. So we could always say how, at least in the products like beverages, to what extent has the sugar consumption in that product been reduced by the substitution with sweetener. So people know, suppose I say I take something in which the sweetener has replaced 2 grams of sugar, which is normally present. I know that this sweetener is not meant for me to lower the sugar, but there's a product where there is a sugar is replaced to almost the extent of 30 grams. There it is clearly the sweetener is giving us a benefit. So a kind of a labeling information might help. And we need, of course, more research and gather evidence. And that is what is the key to it. And people like Dr. Mohan should look into the now design studies specifically to show the kind of outcomes which have been raised right now. And over a period of time, we can always do. There's no urgency. There is no major problem. The major problem right now is the sugar, the physical activity, and the other energy-containing foods which we are consuming at high amounts, which are also contributing to the increase in weight much more than the sugar. And sugar substitutes have never been ever promoted in this country, or we as policymakers, as a way of losing weight.
Oh, okay, yeah. That gives a little more clarity on the guideline, how we should take this guideline, and which means you prefer continuing the status quo, and unless and until we have that extensive data with us specific to India, nothing to worry, or nothing needs to be done immediately. That's what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Everything needs to be done to reduce sugar intake. Nothing needs to be done to change the other thing. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Madan, you're a well-known nutritionist, so you have to add here that what is your personal views on the use of NNS? and its application in clinical diabetics and nutrition.
Yeah.
We can't hear you,
Yeah,
Dr.
okay.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Little louder, maybe you can use the other mic.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yes, much better, much
Okay.
better.
Everyone, good evening, and thank FICCI for making me a part of this conversation with such eminent and respected scientists, whom we consider as our mentors. So thank you for the opportunity. Now, coming to the question which you asked, Dr. Vani, I think I will continue from where Dr. Shashikaran left. I want to make two very important statements. One, that when we read the WHO advisory which has come through, it is very striking that we do not have even a single Indian study which is quoted in this entire compilation of updation of literature, which gives a clear signal to us as a fraternity that we need to create Indian data, and Indian data in relation to, there are so many questions in my mind that, which I will come to later. So the first important statement which I want to make is that reflection out of reading this advisory was that where are we, if it has to be country specific, and if I have to deliberate on this advisory and look at how do I apply it in Indian context, where is the data in relation to NSS and where it is used in India. So that's point number one. Point number two is that what Dr. Shashikaran said, that today we are fighting a battle of lean obesity and just not obesity. And I vouch for this statement because we have an RCT data which tells us in 1300 older adolescents and young adult in the age group of 16 to 25 years in the city of Mumbai, we are finding the incidence of hyperinsulinemia and pre-diabetes to the tune of 29 to 30%. And ironically, majority of them are normal BMI or low BMI, and in spite of hyperinsulinemia, they have a normal HbA1c. And when we take a step forward to do their levels of inflammatory markers, they are extremely elevated. And when we take another step to look at what are they eating, it is their snacking pattern. And if you deep dive into their snacking pattern, 80 to 90% of the population was consuming HFSS, ultra-processed foods on daily basis. Now, so today at a national level, we are fighting a battle of HFSS food. And if in that food, I get a remedy for the free sugar, I think it is welcome. What is not welcome is the matrix in which the NSS is being used in India. If I say that this is a guilt-free dessert, what is that guilt-free dessert? That it is not containing sugar. But have I put my head or my mind to look at what is the matrix of that product? It is containing high fat, and that too sat fat, trans fat. It's containing esterified glycerides, emulsifiers, all components which are bad and which are a part of ultra-processed foods. So that is where my question is, that the matrix in which we are using NSS needs to be evaluated in a country like India. Now we have sweet selling. This is a sweet without sugar. But do we ponder to find out what are the other ingredients in that sweet? So people very proudly say, nahi, isme to sugar nahi hai ji, you can have. But sugar nahi hai, par aur kya ingredients hain? We need to think about it.
So, and sugar nahi hai, that doesn't mean that we can eat it in more quantities. That doesn't give us a license to increase its consumption. So now where are we going wrong? That means what needs to be addressed, besides what Dr. Mohan and Dr. Shashikaran said, that we need to cut down on our carbs, we need to cut down on our free sugar, we need to work towards our lifestyles, increase our physical activity. But I think we need to, rigorously make people understand what is quality nutrition. That means we have to up the game in terms of all the nutritional components which really work as medication, in terms of whether it is, I don't even say losing weight. I would use that phrase, losing body fat. I think the terminology today which needs to be addressed in India is work towards your body composition and don't look at the weighing scale. You may be at 50 kgs, but your body fat can just change. 2%, 4%, you will not even know. And it has a direct correlation with what is the quality of food which you eat. So somewhere in that canvas, I think if we put the NSS in the foods in which it is getting used, of course, sugar sweetened beverages, if we are replacing the sugar with NSS, yes, we are cutting down on calories. But in any case, that's an empty calorie food. And we don't want to encourage people to consume that in very large quantities. Similarly, there's a huge wave of, guilt-free desserts, guilt-free sweets, because people have sweet tooth. And the moment you start marketing sweeteners, with this backdrop, with this matrix, I think we are, really not conveying the right messages to people. So I think I'll stop here, and maybe I can come back to what else.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's the lean diabetes is a big issue actually. Now you actually put a very critical issue here. Lean diabetes means the perception needs to be changed. Now because of all the propaganda and all that, and also maybe the genuine recommendation of reducing sugar, people are under the impression that there is no sugar and everything is safe. So the point what Dr. Madan mentioned is very important, that we have to look at the whole dietary routine of people. What are the other ingredients you consume without control? So that's more important. Now again, let me come to Dr. Rajiv Chawla. So adding to this, what we heard from the panelists so far, what do you think? You have been practicing for a very long time. You have seen different kind of patients. So in your practice with the diabetes and obesity, how important is sugar reduction, and how safely people can shift to the NSS? And now in the context of the WHO guideline, what would you think, what would you suggest to your patient?
Thank you. I'll start from where you left and where Dr. Madan and Dr. Shashikaran discussed a concept which was given by Professor Mohan almost 20 years ago. We talked about thin fat Indian phenotype or Asian phenotype. So we are different. That is very, very important to understand, that we at a BMI of 90 to 23, which for a Caucasian may be very thin person, we are normal. Anything between 23 to 25 BMI, we are already overweight, and anything more than 25.1, we are already obese. Comparing with a Caucasian, where a BMI of 25 to 27 is absolutely normal. So not only we tend to develop type 2 diabetes and coronary artery disease and overall cardiovascular disease at a much lower BMI, as she very rightly said, that we have much more visceral fat. There is a YY paradox of phenomena. Yudkin and Dr. Yagnik from Pune, a beautiful depiction of a study that at same BMI, a Indian or a Asian versus a Caucasian is absolutely different. It was published about 20 years ago, where Yagnik had 23% visceral fat and Unique had only 19%. So we are different people, our needs are different. The guidelines which are published based on Caucasian data may not serve to our purpose. So even if we are talking today of these WHO guidelines, which are first thing not meant for our type 2 diabetes patients, as Dr. Mohan very rightly said, we are here not discussing non-diabetic persons, those who are obese, and there we are talking of NSS as a mean to weight reduction. I think that is a long point to discuss. And where BMI is, our concern is not BMI, our concern is reduction of visceral fat by adopting an active lifestyle, by doing a 150 minute of exercise on daily basis, by being physically active, by doing resistance exercises at least twice a week, by adopting work-related activity. Even if I am going to say serve some company, I must walk till my metro station. That may be 1 kilometer going and coming back. So those are the means to address obesity in our type 2 diabetes patient. You said that how many of them are obese? Unfortunately, as per Asian or IDF criteria, 85% of type 2 diabetes patient, they are either overweight or obese. Dr. Mohan's ICMR data recently published, obesity overall is about 29%. But once we talk of visceral obesity, that visceral fat around your waist, that is 35%. So every second person who has diabetes either is overweight or is obese. But if you talk of overall obesity, Indian patient, that is also to the tune of about 35%, those who are not even diabetic. So I think today most important thing is to adopt an active lifestyle. Let's not create another controversy of using NSS as a means of weight reduction. She very rightly said, if your meal or your dessert or a Swedish or maybe a cake or an ice cream which already has 100 calories gets 5 calories less because it doesn't have sugar, is not going to serve any purpose. So as physicians, as diabetologists, most important thing is to have a balanced diet, to adopt a very, very active lifestyle. Let's forget NSS is not our need. NSS is a compulsion in all type 2 diabetes patient. Those, as Dr. Mohan very rightly said in the beginning, those who want at least 2 or 3 cups of tea or maybe a cup of coffee in the day, which needs to be sweetened, where you'll maximum use 3 or 4 tablets, which is still 1/10 of what is ADI. ADI is already 100 times lesser than what is a toxic dose. So I think we need to have a very balanced view. We need to address our own issues. These guidelines are in any case not addressed for a diabetic population, to our population, to our policy makers, because our needs are different, our challenges are different, so our approach has to be absolutely different.
Thank you. Yeah. So you're saying that the WHO guideline, what they're saying is not a big issue for us. Our issues are much bigger than that, and we have to focus on that. That's what you are concluding. Okay, Dr. Mangesh Tiwaskar, let me invite your views on this. As an endocrinologist, how do you see the role of sweeteners in replacing sugar intake?
Yeah, so most of these legendaries have already talked about it adequately, and as I really agree to what Dr. Mohan has alluded in his talk, that most of the Indians will require that small finish with the sweet taste. I believe that is one area where probably artificial sweeteners might have a role as far as the replacement with the sugars are concerned. And overall, as everybody has alluded to, I think rather than looking at the WHO guidelines and all the nitty-gritties of it, I believe that let us understand the country-specific needs and challenges, which probably Dr. Jagmeet has already beautifully she mentioned about our necessities, and I really appreciate her view on that. We need to have our own data, we need to have our own research work published and generated which will suit our Indian population, and we need to also understand the sensitivity that yes, of course, we as an Indian population being so carbocentric will need all small that sweetness which will be there. So as Mohan sir has already beautifully alluded, that it would be that last straw on the camel's back, but that if you start deloading it and discourage people in actually having these fortified foods which ultimately add to the challenge, I think that would be really a good message for the community as a whole for today's evening our deliberations.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Mathur, now we want your views on this. Now the reduction in sugar intake by getting acquainted to the taste without sugar. I think that's almost, we are getting into that level. So what are your views on on this? So sugar needs to be reduced in our intake.
Yes,
But what is more important now? How we can achieve that particular level?
So yeah, good evening.
Because now WHO is talking about the non-sugar sweeteners. So we are now in a confused state that whether we need to shift that, or we need to do that, or we have to come back to the thing. We need to have sweetener also, but
Right.
what needs to be done?
Right. So I just want to say this, that sweetness is an integral part of our life, and nobody can deny that. But this is coming from our food habits. Now, as a nutritionist and also as someone who's been researching the artificial sweeteners, in fact, we just finished our own systematic review on this topic. And what is really emerging is that, one, we don't really know how much right now people are eating. So we have some data from clinicians, and we have a few of our own studies from my college. The problem is we actually don't know how much we are eating to comment on. Are we eating too much? So what we are doing, I'll tell you currently. So if it is the processed food, obviously tablets and sachets we can count when we do a diet survey. But when it comes to the processed foods which are there in the market with artificial sweeteners, although the label does say that this is the sweetener present, we don't know how much has been added. So the quantity is not there. So typically the calculation that we do is using the maximum permissible level, which is given by FSSAI, which is looking at, so if every producer is adding to the maximum limit, what would be the intake? And when we have done these surveys, actually we have found that we are eating much below the ADI level. So that answers the question on how much are we having, and should we be very bothered. The problem comes when it is an extreme consumer, as the previous speakers have also mentioned. So it's not coming from eating too much of tablets or sachets. It would be from these products which are artificially sweetened, and primarily the beverages. So most of the studies which we also saw in our own systematic review, as well as what WHO has published now, you will see that most of the studies which are showing the harmful effects, the prospective cohorts, they have mapped these artificially sweetened beverages more. So none of those toxicity or adverse effect studies are actually coming from the pellets or the sachets people are having, but from people regularly consuming a lot of these beverages. So I know, because we have looked at not just diabetics, we have looked at people who are overweight, we have looked at people who are neither overweight nor diabetic, but youngsters who are just consuming this in the hope that, okay, we are not having too many calories. So a lot of college going students we were covering in our survey, and to our surprise, neither the diabetics nor the overweight, it was these youngsters who were having the maximum amount of the sweetener. So that's another angle to who is having. When it comes to, so which one and what should we choose? As a nutritionist, we would always say go with the natural. We are in general against having a lot of chemicals in the diet. In fact, not just us. That is what actually WHO is trying to say, that go back to the natural form. And that's what actually is a movement throughout the world. It is not something which is just happening in our country. And there was the Eat Lancet report, and there were many reports before that, where everyone is saying plant-based diets, eat more natural. So yes, that is the trend, and a lot of people are doing that. Can we give up on the sugar? That's a very interesting question to address. So yes, we do come in contact with a lot of people when we do our counseling and when we interact in our studies. There are lots of people who are health conscious, and they actually have given up on sugar and sugary products.
not because they are diabetic or not because of anything else, just the fear that we will one day get a disease. So it is possible, but yes, it comes at that cost of, motivating yourself to that level where you are, okay, I can abstain. But what my take is, I think you can always reduce the portion size, and that's what makes all the difference. So whatever you are having, just have very little. And that's what I think was FSSAI's campaign of Aaj se thoda kam. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. The whole thing is, okay, enjoy everything, but have it in a much smaller portion size. People are doing that also, and you will see in your friend, in your colleague circle, people do reduce, and then actually they can't eat anything which is very sweet. So this is something which, as a way of life, we can all start adapting to. So whether it is sugar you added or whether it is NNS you added, if you have it in a very small quantity, actually nothing, it is not going to really harm you. So that's the lifestyle, and that's how we have to bring up the kids, because that sweet taste sensation and how much of sweet I like, and all these observations, I have to have a sweet after my meal. These are habits which form in childhood. Then once the child grows up, you can't start saying, now you are an adult, now you stop having. And as Dr. Madan studies, I've also shown the adolescents are getting it. So this is something you have to practice from the beginning, that you get used to less of sweet. And
can I just add to what Pulkit said? I think, Pulkit, you raised a very important point, and I just want to substantiate on what you said. See, the latest pediatric guidelines say that we don't introduce salt and sugar till 1 year of age of a child. So that means when you start weaning a child, you don't use any salt and sugar. And this is my personal experience. There is no complaint from the child. The child consumes. It is the conditioning which happens beyond that. So I think we need to remind ourselves how we have been brought up from the time we are born. And there are so many young parents here. I think we need to be very careful that what we are introducing to our child, as the child is getting weaned, if you are pushing too much of sweet taste, the thresholds of sweetness for that child is going to increase. And as the child grows up, you cannot, not have a sweet tooth at the age of 30, because you've always been brought up, in that environment where your thresholds were high. So this is just a point which I want to kind of emphasize, that, we have to begin that journey from the time we start weaning our child, and till the time these habits, these thresholds are formed, because sugar and salt is essentially conditioning. And you can train yourself to lower thresholds. That's a possibility. And once you've trained yourself, you will not like the high sugar or high salt. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice observation, because this taste acquisition and the conditioning actually created the problem. Now I'm going back to Dr. Mohan. See, from all the speakers, what we now observed is exactly in India, as far as India is concerned, diabetes, the increasing diabetes cases, because of many reasons, is the most serious issue as far as India is concerned. So we know that, the depth of the research knowledge what you have attained so far from your work and your activities. So tell us some solution. What is the solution we have in front of us to reduce the diabetic population in India?
I don't think there is one solution. It is multiple solutions. As was discussed earlier in this meeting, while we know that obesity is a driver of diabetes, we also have lean diabetes. So if you talk only about obesity reduction, you're not going to prevent that. So things which are good for health should be encouraged. And the point made by Dr. Madan that it should start early in life is very well taken. Now, lack of physical activity is one of the strongest contributors to diabetes, and that contributes even to lean diabetes, because it's the insulin resistance can build up even in a lean person. And therefore, physical activity encouragement right from a very young age and promoting that, giving importance to that. We give so much importance to NEAT and marks, and 1 mark here and 1 mark there. Why don't we give 10 marks for physical activity? Unless you do physical activity, you lose 10 marks in NEAT. Everybody will start doing physical activity. We have to change the way we are currently operating. Because of that 1 JEE and 1 NEAT, from 8th standard, 9th standard children, 4 years, 5 years, they go to school, then they go to extra tuition classes, then they are studying for NEAT, then they are studying for this. They're gone. That's a time when they're growing. And by the time they finished all that, not only obesity, lack of physical activity, also eating all wrong foods and all because they're at the wrong time, at the wrong place, but also stress, depression. We're not even talked about causes of that producing diabetes and producing obesity and so on. If you take the whole big picture, I think like China has done, where physical activity from schools has been made compulsory. So like that, I think that is one thing. Second is encouraging healthy eating. And that, I think, again, in a lot of schools, especially in the metropolitan cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and so on, checking what you bring from your home and avoiding junk foods and encouraging children to eat fruit and vegetables, I think is a very, very healthy habit which must be encouraged. While the sweetened beverages is a cause of obesity in the West, and probably it will pick up here too, we are only 10 years behind the West in everything. That is not the commonest cause of obesity. It's not that children are drinking cola all the time here. That was in the US, where people, instead of water, they were getting cola in the taps. I'm sure you know the story that in California, in all schools, instead of water, they were giving colas. You just go and open whichever cola you want, and then soda, and then you drink, Unlimited calories they were getting. Just by stopping that in 2 states, in California, they banned it. They said you cannot give this, only water to be given. Obesity came down in children. So simple things like this in public health are very important. So while we are discussing non-nutritive sweeteners and so on, and obviously very important, you must realize that there's a cost to these non-nutritive sweeteners. Not everybody can even afford to keep on taking these non-nutritive sweeteners. So let us not get into that habit today of drinking non-nutritive sweeteners. And the point made by both Dr. Mathur and Dr. Madan about what goes into that, the non-nutritive sweetener, where is it going into? If you see, it's all very high calorie food. You may not have sugar, but the calorie content is so high. So putting labels on calories, actually it has happened that I'll go to a place and I'll see 800 calories. Gosh, I'll better skip that, So now that in restaurants and everywhere the calories are put up, people will move out. At least somebody who is health conscious will say, let me take a lower calorie alternative. Let me tell you a story about this, introducing from childhood, from age 1 itself, including taste. Now, I grew up, although I am a son of a diabetologist, because there's not much of diabetes in the family. When we grew up, we were always given milk with sugar. So I never knew how milk tasted as a child. I never knew how milk tasted without sugar. So when I got married, my wife asked me, in her house, they had never taken milk with sugar. As a family, they've never taken milk with sugar. So she asked me, how can you ever take milk with sugar? So I said, how can you ever take milk without sugar? So she said, why don't you try it for a week and then tell me? After a month, after taking milk without sugar, I cannot take milk with sugar now. It's impossible. It'll taste like some kheer or paisam or something. It's impossible for me. Somebody gave me milk with sugar. Maybe coffee I can take a little bit with sugar, but milk is totally out. Now that means this 21-day rule of even those, leave alone children and growing up and so on, even as adults, if we train ourselves to do something good, this habit will catch on. You go for a walk 21 days, 22nd day, you will miss your walk. If you have your coffee without sugar 21 days, 22nd day, it will be difficult to take it with sugar. Okay. So even in adulthood, I think we can train ourselves. And if we tell people, okay, if you want to take little sweetener, take it, but there is there is no smoke without fire, as they say. So if somebody, WHO has made such a big report, maybe there's a 1% truth in it, or 2% truth in it, or 5% or 50% truth in it. So why do you want to take excess of something which is a chemical? Take it for small quantities. That doesn't mean, as you said, you don't have to abstain totally and then feel guilty and then feel depressed and all that. If you really feel, take, but don't take it in large quantities. That will be my message to people. But that is not the answer for India for reducing obesity or reducing diabetes. We've got many more things to do. And it's a multi-sectoral thing that is needed to prevent NCDs, not just stopping sugar or stopping NNS.
That's a much bigger issue. We need more days to discuss that, actually. Yeah. Here, let me come back to Rajiv. See, now the pre-diabetes people, that's huge in India. That's what we discussed today. So what is this pre-diabetes, and what is the solution? How we can manage that? How we can reduce that?
Thank you. I explained in my session also, pre-diabetes is a step before diabetes. Anything you label before disease is where you have an opportunity to intervene. You don't say pre-cancer. You say pre-diabetes, you say pre-hypertension, because you can intervene. It's a definite stage in the course of the disease. So you can intervene early to prevent conversion to type 2 diabetes. As I said, there are 101 million diabetics in India now, and unfortunately 136 million pre-diabetes patients. Pre-diabetes patients, if you follow their natural course, 30 to 50% will convert to type 2 diabetes in 5 years' time, until unless you intervene with lifestyle modification, diet, very, very active physical lifestyle. Pre-diabetes we define when fasting sugar is between 100 to 126. Anything more than 126 is diabetes. Or IGT, that means post-meal sugar 2 hours, is anything between 140 to 199, because more than 200 is type 2 diabetes. We can also screen by doing an HbA1c, glycosylated hemoglobin. Normal is less than 5.7. Anything between 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetes, and anything more than 6.4 is type 2 diabetes. And very fact that numbers, as Dr. Mohan also explained, why in last 4 years we are saying that there is a 44% increase in prevalence of type 2 diabetes. It is not that everything has happened over last 4 years. Only thing is, we earlier studied only 15 states. This time we studied 31 states including UTs. We realized that Goa, Kerala, Pondicherry has very high prevalence, close to 27%. Delhi is also not far behind, close to 20%. Rural areas fortunately still have close to 9%, and urban is 16.5. So mean is 11.5 for prevalence of diabetes, and so is pre-diabetes also catching up, close to 15%. So unfortunately the gap between rural and metros or in urban is also disappearing. Earlier it was too much. It used to be 2-3% in rural area, 6-7% in metros. Now it is already 16% in metros and 9% in rural. It is all because of recent urbanization, change in our lifestyle, stress, sane, and of course, as Dr. Mohan very rightly suggested, even students, adolescents, those who are sitting for preparation of exam in 5 years' time, they gain 10 kg weight. They are eating too much. They are taking too much of these beverages, so-called with NSS, forgetting that they are still consuming high quantity of empty calories, what she very rightly said. Dr. Mohan gave you the story of California. There, if you just buy one bottle from fountain, rest everything is free. So that time they encourage that you buy more and more these beverages to increase their sale. But unfortunately that increased the overall prevalence of obesity. We are also unfortunately catching up. Type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes is growing in the background of rising prevalence of obesity, and unfortunately, as I earlier said, we tend to be obese even at 25. So that is why not only pre-diabetes is going up, type 2 diabetes is also going up. We must adopt a very active, healthy lifestyle. Overnight working, shift workers, believe me, many patients we have, those who are working in MNCs overnight, coming from Gurgaon 12 a.m. or 2 a.m., they are the one who are likely to develop diabetes and hypertension much earlier, because moment there is a biological clock reversal, your counter-regulatory hormones goes up, and that increases overall risk of developing diabetes, hypertension, and even coronary artery disease as early as third decade, fourth decade. And unfortunately, we are through now COVID, where we have seen very high prevalence of new onset diabetes, maybe either because of use of steroids, or they were sort of stuck to working online. They were not doing any physical activity, or the stress or the strain. So I think it is all about lifestyle, or all about urbanization, or maybe economic growth, which we need to counter today.
Okay. I think Dr. Madan can take up the following thing on the obesity. That you said about lean diabetes. Now, the obesity is also an equally serious issue in India, which is also growing, especially among the young. So, what are the means of reducing calorie intake yet being able to maintain the dietary, according to you?
So I think the key word which everybody needs to understand is to identify the HFSS foods, the high fat, salt, sugar foods. So that's the sensitization which needs to be done to people at large, and especially the kids. We've done some work wherein the awareness is very, very poor. But if you intervene and if you do, nutrition education, and one thing which also has come out from our work is that if we want to engage with a younger crowd, the engagement has to be very, very participatory and interesting. So it cannot be a monologue. It has to be something wherein they become a party to the activity what you're doing to convey important messages. So I think nutrition education is huge empowerment, and that's where I think myself and even Dr. Pulkit is involved. We are looking at something called as foundation food literacy. So that's a concept which we want to establish, and we want to take it to all the schools. That like how a child learns an alphabet. From an alphabet, he learns to make a word. From a word, he learns to make a sentence. If we convert this analogy into that's how you will teach a child nutrition, starting from nursery to pre-primary to secondary, I think if that's where we begin, in a very, very engaging and innovative way, which we are trying to develop. We are trying to look at the curriculums which are there across schools. We are doing the content analysis, finding the gaps, looking at how this engagement can be made more interactive, coming out with those modules, and then testing it. Because my conviction is that if we want to save this country, we have to empower our children, and starting from the youngest age to the young adult. And empowerment doesn't happen overnight. Empowerment happens, in small bits and pieces, but it has to become a way of life. So it's a huge order, it's a very tall order. But again, we have done so much work. Every time a work tells us that if we, win this battle of nutrition literacy and food foundation literacy, I think, it will be a very big achievement, because once you empower a child, that child, when he's going to become an adult, will be in a position to contain himself or herself in any environment, because the environments are not going to change. The environments are going to push us to all these kind of options. But if my child is empowered, that judicious, prudent choice, that ability, if I can inculcate in my children, I think that's what we should aim for.
Thank you. Now I think we have touched upon most of the general topic, which is in relation to the WHO guideline. Now, in the concluding part, let's narrow down our focus on the guideline and NS. So let me invite Dr. Shashikaran. Now, what next? That should be the conclusion of the discussion. That WHO recommends country-specific substantive discussions in this regard. So, what consideration should be taken before making the policy decisions or the regulatory suggestions?
So, number one is that non-nutritive sweetness, as far as our scientific data is concerned, is safe. Number two, we need to bring down the sugar and high refined carbohydrate intake in our country, along with all other measures. Now, the third is we need to effectively communicate through front of pack labeling, mentioning how much of total calories each serving is providing, of which how much is coming from sugar, how much is coming from fat. And number four, that the non-nutritive sweeteners used, their quantity and how much of sugar it is replacing in that one serve. Information can also be provided, so people don't falsely think that just because they took something which had a sweetener, it has got low energy. In fact, there is I very often see many advertisements saying diabetes friendly. So what is diabetes friendly? In fact, I'm part of the Advertising Standards Council of India. I help them in deciding which advertisement is good and which is not so good. Many of these diabetics friendly actually are doing more harm than good. Because the moment it is written diabetics friendly, the patients indulge in it happily, thinking it is meant for diabetes, and all the while it has got high calories. So the presence of sweeteners is not doing harm directly, but it is doing harm indirectly by giving a free hand for making these kind of labeling, and therefore we have to be very, FSSA should come down heavily on the labeling part of it. So the easiest and the best way of communication to every individual in this country is through the front of pack labels and also through the media. Since Unnikrishnan, you are moderating it, the power of the media is so much that the right kind of communication will go a long way to help our people to reduce their risk, and therefore the right kind of information has to be given. So regulation has to now have a relook and see how best they can bring in this front of pack labeling so that it provides all the information. So even those who want to lose weight don't get carried away by the fact that the mere presence of a non-nutritive sweetener will actually make them lose weight. So communication, regulation, and subsequently implementation. In fact, it's not enough if we have regulation, you have to implement it properly. And if these are done, then the non-nutritive sweeteners can be used in a manner which is beneficial to our population, and there is no need to create any kind of fear about it.
Okay. Dr. Tivaskar, could you please tell us, what is your scientific view on the safety side of NSS? Because WHO specifically say that this particular guideline doesn't talk about the safety side, because I also understand that because the safety has been proven with lots of data, lots of studies which we conducted earlier in different countries in India itself. So what's your detailed view on that? We can quickly come on those points and
I'll be very brief, and thank you for that question. But Dr. Mohan has beautifully alluded to that. I believe that as far as the safety of non-nutritive sweeteners are concerned, and what are the challenge areas, what are raised? Cancer, kidney problem, alteration of the gut microbiota. Believe me, it's the disease which is causing it. It's the obesity, it's diabetes. Diabetes makes you more cancer prone. Diabetes makes your kidneys vulnerable to go into the failure. Diabetes alters your gut microbiota more than a small portion of the chemical which is going in. Honestly speaking, I believe that, rather than being scared, as Dr. Shashikaran has beautifully alluded to, is this that, that we need to have those proper guided, I would say advices to most of the people of right kind of benefits that these non-nutritive sweeteners can have. And I'll go ahead with what Dr. Mathur was alluding to, or even Dr. Madan was alluding to. Where the non-nutritive sweeteners come into the picture is the moment you take sweet out of the Indian population, Why people lie to us, why people want to run away from the diagnosis of diabetes, why they do not accept it, is because the scare of that the moment somebody gets a diagnosis of diabetes, these labels of no things in the life will come. I cannot do this, I cannot do this, I cannot do this. And this is the place where we need to really work on. We want to teach people, we have to teach people to live with diabetes, not to suffer with diabetes. Isn't it? We don't say that I suffer with my spouse. I always say that I live with my spouse. So that is the place where it is to be really taken very, 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 very seriously. And that is the place where probably these non-nutritive sweeteners will surely come into the picture. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Mohan, let me ask a small question. That suppose, is there a likelihood of some research data or some existing data coming up to contradict the WHO view, the current view of WHO, that it actually helps weight loss or sugar control? I'm talking about NSS.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, 3 days later, we are presenting 3 studies at the American Diabetic Association meeting. And immediately after that, we can publish the results. These are carefully done RCTs and very carefully done studies. And so Dr. Madan was also saying that there's no Indian data. Hopefully, there will be some Indian data. We have not studied all the sweeteners. We have taken sucralose as the only one. We couldn't do all together, but probably we'll do more studies as we go along. I can't give you the exact results because before it's present at ADA, they don't like it to be revealed. But all I can tell you that the data which has come out, so we've studied people with diabetes, we've studied people who are overweight and not diabetic, and we also looked at the gut microbiota. The 3 separate studies, all the 3 are positive, actually. As far as the gut microbiota is concerned, no significant changes in that. As far as the other 2 studies are concerned, actually beneficial results were seen. But again, I must hasten to add, we cannot equate this with what WHO is talking about. First of all, they didn't talk about diabetes at all. And they said we are leaving diabetes out of the equation, they said. So straight away, all our studies on diabetes don't even come into that. The other thing that what we did was, we are talking about small pellets and small sachets being given. Our study didn't include big deserts being given to people with thousands of pellets put in there. And we have not done such studies because it's foolish to even to try to do that. We know what's the point in doing something which is actually, is harmful, and then trying to give it and see whether it's actually harmful or not. It's not even ethical to do that. When philosophically, we don't even support that. What we're talking about, if somebody stops sugar, somebody's taking sugar, they stop that and then they try this. What happens to their LDL? What happens to their HDL? What happens to their triglyceride? What happens to their body weight? What happens to their waist? What happens for a few months if they take it? What happens to them? That is the data which we are seeing. I think that data is not very much there in the world literature, where people don't study this. They just look at a huge data, those who consume all these drinks and so on. Now, if you look at it in a cohort study or an observational study, people who consume all this, I'm sure they must be having other bad habits also. They may be smoking, they may be doing something else. So you cannot correct for everything, all the confounders in a study. And therefore, hopefully our data will come out showing that not only they are safe, but may have beneficial effects if used in the proper way.
Okay. Okay. Let me come to the concluding question. Just one question for all the speakers. That in the light of the WHO observation now, what is next? Do you all have some suggestion to the industry, to the regulator, to the government? Now, because the moment the WHO came out with the guideline, the social media has started taking up and spreading a lot of wrong information, bad information. We don't know. So we have to have some conclusive suggestion now to give it to the stakeholders, that what needs to be done and how we can go about it. So to the industry, to the regulator, to the government, to the public, what is your brief suggestion in the light of the WHO guide about NSS? I'll ask Dr. Mohan to start with.
I think all the bodies have to come together because if one of us says something, it's a just one person's opinion. But if the Indian Dietetic Association and the RSSDI, ESI, Physicians Association, if 3-4 associations consisting of diverse people with different interests and experience, if we all come together and give a statement about this, it can be a one-page thing saying that we have studied the WHO thing, we agree in these parts. These parts perhaps do not apply to people with diabetes. And then in India, the consumption pattern is like this, and we need more Indian data on this. But as of now, there's nothing to panic. I mean, to say that if somebody takes a sweetener, you will die and all that cardiovascular, come on, it's just, going beyond the limit, I think. What? I've not seen one death. In my 50 years, you show me one death.
Okay.
Don't talk about 50 deaths or 100. Show me one person who died of taking a sweetener. I'll resign my practice if you do that, So, I mean, at least things like that. Don't be alarmist and don't frighten people by one guy is taking one, I'm going to die tomorrow. You're going to create fear, panic in people, Tell them don't overdo it, continue what you're doing. We don't have data, we are collecting Indian data. I think something like that coming from the associations is worthwhile. Without going for sweeteners or against sweeteners, just say what we think and let the collective wisdom of a group like this be put into a white paper, which can then be given to the government, because the government will also be asking, oh, tell us about WHO. What do they know? They depend on people like us, experts like us. So let's do that. I think that would be my reaction, rather than taking sides or trying to be, conflicted or something. Let different bodies come together and give what we think is a right thing, and many of the things we discussed in this meeting should actually come out as a white paper. That will be my suggestion.
Thank you. Dr. Shashikaran.
I agree with what Mohan said. I think the professional body should come together, and the Food Safety Authority of India, which is the regulator of the food, will consult the professional bodies, and then through their mechanism, they should bring in appropriate front of pack labeling and all communication ways of communicating the right kind of information. And of course, through media and social media also, the right kind of information should be provided, and for which the first step will be the professional consultation and the regulatory acceptance of that, whatever advice the professionals have given.
Dr. Tivaskar. Thank you, Dr. Shashikaran.
Yeah, so my take on this is, as both of these gentle geniuses have talked about, primarily we need to understand that anything excess is always bad. So why to blame it just on the sweetness? So let us understand that importance of utilizing in a smart form, in an probably ADIs, and always be sensitized that maybe that this could be one of the ways of maybe motivating people. So use it in a right way. And as Dr. Mohan has said, I think the associations have to join hands together and then come out with a really realistic, practical solutions to everybody, and then probably submit it to the government and the regulatory authorities to, in fact, put it on the larger domains. And even the FICCI has a bigger role to play in this as well.
Thank you.
I completely endorse what Dr. Mohan said, what Dr. Shashikaran said, and what Dr. Tivaskar said. I only want to add that my concern is, of course, Dr. Mohan said we don't have Indian data, but my concern is definitely our young adults, the consumption of ultra processed foods, and especially deep diving into which are the foods, food matrix where the sweetener is getting used, and in the name of using a sweetener, if this population is consuming such foods with ingredients which are pushing them to more NCDs, I think that's an area which I would definitely like to add on to whatever has been said. Because we are seeing, a lot of hyperinsulinemia, a lot of inflammation in this kind of age group. So it's worth exploring. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can collect the data on that. That can be one of the recommendations of the guidelines, saying that let's get data on that and then publish that.
Exactly. I think what Dr. Mohan is saying, I think before we go for an expert consensus by organization like API, RSSD, endocrine or IDA body, I think it will be worthwhile having a multi-center study the way you have done and what you are presenting at ADA, maybe 15, 20 center across the country. We accumulate our own data over 24 weeks will be good enough. And then we can go to the government of India. We may have a representation with Ministry of Health, DCGI and other bodies to formulate an expert consensus involving all KLs across from different fraternities and then come out with a white paper on expert consensus. But of course, we, as everyone has been saying, that we are not still convinced on WHO guidelines as long as our diabetes patients are concerned, because our consumption of NSS is going to be extremely less. But I think we need to be pharmacovigilant, even if, as she very rightly said, adolescents, they are consuming too much of beverages or dense foods which are rich in NSS, or high quantity of NSS may be consumed by many adolescents. So there we need to be pharmacovigilant. Although that systemic review or analysis didn't have much to say, and as I said in my session also, talking of increase in CV mortality with small RCTs lasting for 6 months is not the right way. We should have more randomized control prospective data with robust numbers, strength to say whether we are erring when we are prescribing NSS. Till then, we as physician, lot of onus is there on us. We need to be pharmacovigilant, and whenever there is something which is alarming, we need to report it as case studies. Fortunately, as Dr. Mohan very rightly said, last 40 years I am also in practice, we haven't seen even a single mortality coming as a result of NSS. Well, it is a multifactorial disease. Anyone who has type 2 diabetes, diabetic nephropathy will not die of diabetic nephropathy, dies of coronary artery disease. So you can never come to know those small things which might be happening. So I think we need to be pharmacovigilant there also.
Dr. Mathur?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to add to that. We all agree that more studies need to be done. Now, while we were doing our own systematic review, what we noticed, what was the shortcoming in the studies which were reported by these in different papers, is that, you know, as rightly mentioned, the sample size is very small. So the study design has to be good. So this is calling out to all researchers, clinicians, academicians who are going to plan and do such studies. So one is looking at sample size. If you have a very small sample size, then, you know, it doesn't really tell much. The other is it has to be a homogeneous sample. So when you pick, so one of the reasons why the WHO report is showing very low certainty of evidence is because they are compiling and, you know, doing a meta-analysis of very heterogeneous studies. So they are actually not able to get the data together to do a proper meta-analysis. So when this study is, you know, whatever is planned, we should have a study design which is then comparable with the others. So a multicentric study is the best option. But if individual researchers who are not a part of all these multicentric studies want to take it up, there should be a common guideline of this is the kind of data we need and this is the ideal study design, which has sample size, who is your sample, and not just that, you know, the mapping. So most of these studies have done what? They've looked at a very short term of, you know, intake of the sweetener. So they don't even look at the total energy intake of the person. They're just looking at, you know, the short term, whatever amount was given for that particular period. That is all they are looking at. So this whole thing of whether they'll gain weight in the longer run, the answer will come only if you monitor in these studies what is the total energy intake, how is it changing over time, and what is causing really the change. Is it the NNS or is it the other things this person has started eating or has changed his physical activity? So those are the kind of things we have to control for. And in the end, I'd just like to add one line. See, for everything, the nutritionist will tell you moderation is the right path. Don't, so either eating too less of a thing or eating too much of a thing is going to cause a problem. So moderation is always the safe path to stay on. Thank you.
Thank you all speakers. Now we can take some questions from the audience if you have. I think we have, I have asked most of your questions. On behalf of you, I ask the questions. Now we can take some questions. Make it very brief. Make it very brief. Introduce yourself. Yeah. And you can specify the speaker whom you want to address the question.
I hope you can all hear me now.
We can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for this very enlightening session. I'm Dr. Vipul Indora, and I'm an MBBS MD physician. And I have been working on metabolic syndrome reversals since last 7 years. So I have done my studies from Delhi itself, Maulana Azad Medical College. And in metabolic syndrome reversals, I have seen my patients losing 50 kgs of weight, 60 kgs of weight, which is again one of the good result which I have seen. But people usually lose 10 to 20 to 30 kgs of weight quite easily. The reason is because as you know, all the great speakers here have mentioned that it's a multifactorial disease, and we have been working on 12 areas where people go wrong. So those 12 areas are diet, lifestyle, the toxins in the body, the stress levels, the personal habits, and everything. So we are actually so much focused on that. And as Dr. Mohan sir has very the study has not come out yet, but you have said that there are some positive results about NSS. I very confidently recommend NSS to people, and they are getting great results even in weight loss. But I don't have any studies to support it, but I'm seeing it practically. So maybe we can do it more studies. So one of the reasons which I can feel is because as Dr. Chawla sir has said that, and then it was like there is no insulinogenic effect. So if you are taking non-sweeteners like NSS, so the insulin levels don't go up. So probably then this can help in weight loss as well, as practically I see people losing weight if I take them off sugars and put them on sweets and all this stuff. So this is
Do you
what.
have any question? What is your
So
question?
the question is, sir, so the whole discussion is like it's not related to diabetes, and then is it really helpful in obesity? So this is my question, that if we put this thing, or maybe question or an added part of the discussion that to the doctors and the great nutritionists here, that if we are giving NSS, even people can lose weight. So what do you say, the speaker panelist here?
Anybody can take briefly.
I think repeatedly we have said that for obesity management, you require lifestyle modification. Nothing like, of course, you have to reduce calories. There is a concept of very low calorie diet. There is a concept of LCD, but it has to go with an active lifestyle with minimum 150 minutes of exercise on weekly basis, with 2 sessions of or 3 sessions of resistance exercise and reduction in calories. Now, reduction in calories depends on overall profile of the patient, what patient is eating. If patient is eating too much carbohydrate, even if you cut it there, even if you don't supplement with NS, it will work. But someone who is consuming, say, a lot of sweets or a lot of fat or a lot of snacking is happening, even if you substitute with NSS, it is not going to work. Certain patients, those who are taking very large portion size, frequent meals, there we do meal replacements. Those are better. We reduce about 256 calories in a particular meal and they can lose weight. So it all depends on the overall eating pattern of the patient. Most important thing is lifestyle modification, exercise and diet restriction. Plus minus NSS.
Any more questions?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any more questions? We can take maybe a couple of questions. Okay. I think we have discussed most of the things, and now what we observe from the very the discussion with the experienced formed people, that there needs a lot more discussions on this. Maybe the FICCI has initiated this. This could be one of the initial discussions on this, and there could be multiple discussions like this. And at the end of the day, we should have some kind of conclusive suggestions to be followed for India, specific to India. I think that's the take-home message what we can conclude from today's session. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. Just a quick one, Dr. Mangesh has to leave, so please excuse him. Dr. Mangesh, please. A special thanks to Dr. Sesikaran for keeping him awake. He's calling from US. So thank you very much for joining and taking so much of pain. Thank you, Dr. Mohan, for being online with us for throughout the seminar. Thank you so much. Now, may I request Dr. Mr. Tarun to come on the dais, please? Just would like to give a token of appreciation to each one of our speakers who are present here. Mr. Unni Krishnan, please. Mr. Rajiv Chawla. Thank you. Pulkit Mathur.
One group picture.
Thank you so much. Sir, please. Chair, sir. Thank you. Just please take a seat for a moment. We'll just conclude, and then we will we'll request you for the high tea. So I would like to take a moment from FICCI to express my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you who came together on this platform. Throughout our time together, we have explored diverse perspectives, delved into thought-provoking discussions, and expanded our horizons on the subject matter at hand. I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to our esteemed speakers whose expertise and insightful presentations have contributed immensely to our understanding of the topic. Your dedication to sharing your knowledge has been truly remarkable, and we are grateful for the wisdom you have imparted upon us. I would also like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of the organization committee. Without them, this event would not have been possible. Their meticulous planning, attention to detail, commitment have ensured a seamless experience for all of us. I would also like to express my appreciation to each participant in the seminar. Your active engagement, thoughtful questions, and willingness to share your experience have created a vibrant and dynamic atmosphere. Thank you once again for your active participation and unwavering enthusiasm throughout the seminar. I request everyone to join us for the high tea, please. Thank you so much for joining once again.